blood in this fight, in this war. We have to bring the children back now as top priority, no matter what.
But there is now a chance to bring home some, if not all, of the women and children being held in Gaza, like Cherie Bibas and her little boys Ariel and baby Kafir, the youngest of the hostages, only 10 months old. And Amelia, abducted with her mother Danielle and her twin cousins Julie and Emma, seized with their parents Sharon and David. There are thought to be as many as 90 women and children being held in Gaza. The deal could be extended by a day for every 10 extra hostages that Hamas agrees to release. But the Israeli government insists the fighting will eventually resume as they work to eliminate Hamas.
Alistair, when will we know more?
Well, the Israeli government has now released the names of the 150 Palestinian prisoners that they expect to let out of Israeli jails. And we are now into this 24-hour period where Israelis, if they feel a need to do so, could object to any of those Palestinians being released, and they'll take those objections to Israel's Supreme Court. It's not expected that that will result in a delay in this truce coming into effect, but it does mean that for the families, it is an agonising wait. All being well, I think the truce will go into effect in the early hours of tomorrow morning. It looks like it will be the Qataris who will announce it, and then we will be into this 4-day period and we will see hostages released from Gaza each day over a phased period. And there is the possibility that it could be extended further. The Israelis think there's at least 90 Israeli women and children being held in Gaza, so there is a possibility it could be extended further. But the Israelis have been very clear. Whenever this temporary ceasefire ends, they will resume the fighting because they still want to eliminate Hamas, and there will still be Israeli hostages, particularly Israeli soldiers, being held in Gaza.
OK, Alistair, thanks. As Alistair was saying, Qatar very influential in this deal, but the US as well. James stayed up specially for us to tell us more about the involvement of the US in brokering this deal. Very good morning to you, James, where you are.
Good morning, Kay. For the President, this was personal, and that was made clear in a statement that the White House released late last night. It read, referring to the President and his wife, "Jill and I have been keeping all those held hostage and their loved ones close to our hearts. I'm extraordinarily gratified that some of those brave souls will be reunited with their families." He's a man who does empathy, and he's doing it there. US officials talk about a gut-wrenching afternoon inside the White House when Joe Biden, a week after conflict broke out, had a Zoom call with relatives of hostages taken. And it was then, after that, that he became directly and personally involved in the delicate process to get us to where we are at the moment. In terms of American hostages, one of the youngest of those taken is 3-year-old Abigail Edan. Her family spoke to Sky News last week, spoke about their hopes that she would be coming home. They hope she will be amongst that first 50 to be released. And of course, that first 50 may well not be the last, as Alistair was saying in his report. And American officials, they are talking about a deal structured in such a way that it should incentivize, as they put it, the release of everybody, given that they hope for further releases in exchange for further pauses in hostilities.
OK, James, Vinay, thank you. 4 youngsters who won't be going home are teenagers who died on their way to a camping trip on Snowdonia. You member of the team, Amelia, you've got more for us.
Absolutely. Well, this is a camping trip that no one would have wanted, a really tragic end for these 4 teenagers and their family and friends. North Wales Police have confirmed that 4 teenagers, the bodies of those 4 teenagers, have been found in a partially submerged, upturned vehicle that left the road on Sunday. They'd been missing since Sunday, missing for 2 days. Obviously, their family, friends had wanted answers. They'd been looking for Jevon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Wilf Henderson and Hugo Morris. And of course, today, investigations will still be underway, trying to find out what exactly happened here. But a community will very much be coming together to grieve and to try to process what has happened. These boys were from Shrewsbury. We've heard today that Shrewsbury Colleges Group, where the boys were A-level students, have offered their condolences. They've said they've put in place a range of support measures as well to help those who need support over the coming days. Local churches as well have said that from 9 o'clock today, spaces will be open for prayers and reflection, and they'll look to open more spaces over the coming days for people who want to continue to do so. And also Shrewsbury Abbey is open all day for prayer and reflection. But in terms of more personal tributes, we've heard in the last few hours from the mother of one of the boys. Crystal Owen, the mother of Harvey Owen, has said on Facebook, and this is really heartbreaking, "I feel like I'm in a nightmare I wish I could wake up from, but I'm not. I just want to say I do appreciate people's kindness, but no amount of messages is going to help me overcome this. Nothing will make the nightmare go away." We've also heard from Maddie Cordfield, the girlfriend of Wilf Henderson. She said that he's the sweetest and most loving boy I've ever known. So clearly what is happening now is a community is trying to grieve and police are very much trying to find answers.
OK, but no, Amelia, thanks very much indeed. Meantime, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer to the government throughout the pandemic, that's Sir Jonathan Van Tam, will give evidence today at the inquiry into the handling of COVID-19. The Chief Medical Officer, as I said, will be speaking to the inquiry that will benefit from the hindsight from the first lockdown. New research has found that some hospital disinfectants are no more effective at killing off a superbug than water. Scientists at the University of Plymouth found that bleach, which is used to clean hospital scrubs and surfaces, does not kill a bacteria which infects millions of people every year. Experts are warning that without new disinfectants and guidelines, staff and patients will be at risk. And the TV and radio presenter Annabel Giles has died 4 months after being diagnosed with a brain tumour. Her children revealed the news, calling the 64-year-old an incredible mother and truly one of a kind on social media. The presenter was perhaps best known for presenting the 1990s ITV fashion show Posh Frocks and New Trousers. And the plan to expand Wimbledon's tennis courts has suffered a setback after local councillors voted to reject the proposals. The plans included 39 new grass courts and an 8,000-seater show court. The application will now be referred to the Mayor of London's office. Big day for the government today, particularly the Chancellor. Morning.
Morning, Kay. Absolutely huge day for the Chancellor. Now, today really is going to an extent, set the tone for the general election campaign. This is going to be seen as phase one in terms of tax cuts, in terms of fiscal policy post-COVID. So the expectation is there's going to be more potential giveaways, potentially in the spring statement, for example, next year. This is just the kind of getting things going on, essentially Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt doing what they really want to do, which is low tax, kind of traditional fiscal policy from a Conservative point of view. So Sky News understands a cut to the national insurance is very, very, very likely. That's really the most likely cut to personal taxes. And we know there's going to be tax cuts for businesses as well. The question is exactly which taxes and how much. That's not quite clear yet. There's lots of speculation in the papers about different types of tax cuts and whether they would be permanent or short term. Now, the Chancellor today is expected to talk about how this is a budget for growth. It's all about growing the economy and trying to bounce back from COVID. And he's expected to say that the government are going to reject big government, high spending and high tax, which is somewhat ironic considering what we've seen from the Conservatives over the past few years, which you would say to an extent is quite a big state and high tax. The tax burden is a 70-year high at the moment. So this is really a moment where the Conservatives are trying to go back to their traditional values and show before a general election that they are actually Tories.
And That's after PMQs?
After PMQs, about 12:40-ish.
Lovely, thank you, thank you. Looking at the morning's papers for you, previewing the autumn statement, as we have just done ourselves. The Eye saying the Chancellor will cut personal taxes, but expects interest rates to remain high until the year after next. Wow, that's a long way away, isn't it? 2025. Guardian says Jeremy Hunt has given in to party demands for tax cuts in a bid to revive the economy. The Times says his announcements will benefit workers and businesses, while the Telegraph predicts it will be the biggest tax cut for businesses in 50 years. And finally, looking at the Financial Times for you, £9 billion is the figure the Financial Times puts on the value of the cuts. The number of animals being abandoned by their owners has risen to a 3-year high. Now there's a warning from the RSPCA that pets face a bleak winter due to the ongoing cost of living crisis. Let's get more with Alice.
These cats once had homes and owners. Now they've been deserted as the cost of living bites.
Vet fees are going up, pet food is going up, pet toys are going up, and unfortunately we're finding more and more people are deciding to abandon their animals.
Terra Lucio is one of them. She was taken in by the RSPCA after her owner couldn't afford the vet fees when she fell from a building. It's a similar story for all these cats.
Where's he going? Where's he going?
The pandemic caused a surge in demand for dogs as people were at home and looking for companionship. Unfortunately, that's contributed to this current situation, as there's now more owners struggling with the costs of having a dog.
The RSPCA say more than 18,000 animals have been abandoned so far this year, but they're not the only organisation that are noticing how the cost of living is impacting owners and animals across the country.
The Blue Cross works directly with food banks to provide pet food for owners who can't afford it.
Because of a whole number of circumstances, and the cost of living being one of them, our shelves are empty, and so we're having requests from our food bank partners, and we're not able to wholly fulfil those requests.
Terra Lucio now has a new home, but thousands of pets across the country are not so lucky, and with inflation remaining high, the worry is that the situation may simply get worse. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Still to come on the programme for you this Wednesday morning, 7:30, we'll be speaking to Israel Defence Forces spokesperson, that's Peter Lerner. 8:30, we'll bring speaking to a man whose relatives have been taken by Hamas. And 8:45, joined by a professor of immunology to discuss the latest developments in the COVID inquiry. Before that, it's the autumn statement at 12:40 today. What might be in it, we don't know. Maybe Stephen Hammond, Tory MP, does. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
What do you want to be in it?
I want to see three things, really. I want to see that we have shown that we can run the economy fiscally responsibly, and I think you're going to see that today with some of the ABR forecasts about the fact that debt is now beginning to fall. I think I want to see if there's room for tax cuts in terms today, then I want to see, as has been well trailed this morning, something that benefits more people, and national insurance does that, or you could have moved some of the lower thresholds, but it looks like it's national insurance. And the one thing that you will know that I wrote something on over the weekend was actually ensuring that we boost business.
Boosting growth, it's called, isn't it?
Yeah, it is called boosting growth. One of the ways to do that is to ensure that companies can invest so that it grows for the future in a non-inflationary way. And doing what we think we're going to do, which is the 100% of expensing, will mean that it simplifies the tax system, it gives businesses certainty, and the OBR is saying that's already boosting investment growth by about 3% a year. So if you make it permanent, that's likely to do more.
Why would he do all these things now rather than in the budget before a general election, which we all know is coming? Or is he lucky to be able to have two bites at the cherry?
Well, I think that it's the fact is the matter is that we have had for many years these two fiscal events every year, a budget and an autumn statement. He's got more fiscal room because the economy is growing slightly more strongly than people had expected in March now. And it seems to me sensible that if you want to see an economy grow, why don't you give, we've already seen some forecasts upgraded, why don't you give it that boost now?
You talked about tax cuts. The reason that he has that fiscal headroom, which basically means more money, is because inflation has come down. Suggestion is tax cuts will push inflation back up again.
Well, that depends what type of tax cuts you make.
That's why you talk about national insurance.
Precisely, which is much less. If you'd done the personal tax cut now in a big way, it might well have done. If you cut that now, it might well have done. But by doing this, it actually helps workers. I see that, reading the papers this morning, the Resolution Foundation says this is going to benefit 28 million people.
You talked also about well, you didn't talk specifically about the minimum wage, but let's talk about it. You said it will be benefiting lots of people. The first time that we've seen an increase of this magnitude, potentially, he's not given us the details yet, in a decade.
Yeah, I mean, what he has quite rightly, in my chosen to do is that there was a lot of speculation as where he could have given himself more room by using a lower number than what you would normally use. But by using the September inflation number, which was higher than the October number, the upgrade to benefits across the system will be bigger and also true for people on national minimum wage. And that seems to me to be the right thing to do.
Is any of this pointing towards an early election?
I don't know. I think what it's pointing to is that we're starting to show that after last year, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have got the economy beginning to grow. We've got debt falling. I would have thought that if I were them, they would want to show that they can do that through next year.
OK. Tell me a bit more about your report that you've authored, Boosting Growth. You're from the One Nation caucus of Tory MPs. First of all, what does that mean? And secondly, how supportive are you of this Chancellor?
So what that means is really when you're a One Nation, what we're saying is that we are, I think, socially liberal, fiscally responsible. It means that we believe in opportunity, and it means we should be the party of business. And it's those four things that I think underpin being a One Nation Conservative.
You've had 13 years to do that, haven't you?
And of course, we've had the third highest growth in the G7 over those 13 years. But as always, these are enduring values. These are values that were set out in the middle of the 19th century, and the Conservative tradition comes from that. And to your point, I think that some of the things that we argued for in that report, it appears the Chancellor may be doing today. So I'm fully supportive of this Chancellor.
OK. My viewers this morning will think, yeah, but what about income tax? When's that coming down?
Well, if I could tell you that, Kay, I'd
I
be
thought
the
you were going to tell me that we don't necessarily need income tax to come down in order for people to feel that they've got more money in their pocket. But I'm putting words in your mouth.
Well, I can say that as well. But I mean, I think the more important thing is two things. One is I'm not Chancellor of the Exchequer, but I think the key thing at the moment is actually getting inflation down as well, because that will make people feel better off. And that is a key part of what you're going to hear again today as a central plank of the government's policy. And halving it, which was the objective for this year, makes a real difference.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the most recent Sky News poll tracker as I'm talking to you, giving Labour a 20-point lead over the Conservatives. He's going to have to do a lot more than just tinkering around the edges with national insurance to convince people to vote for you.
Well, I think what would put people off even more as a starting point is if we were doing irresponsible things today. This is a sensible first move that will actually benefit 28 million people. And, I have been, as you well know, a Conservative MP for a very long period of time. And in December 2008, we were 15 points ahead in the polls. And in June 2010, we didn't have an overall majority. And I just think this today will be the starting point of showing that the economy is beginning to recover and people are going to be better off under the Conservatives.
I suppose what I'm trying to allude to is whether this is the right Chancellor for the job, because there's been lots of speculation in the papers over the last 2 or 3 weeks that he would have been moved during the reshuffle. He wasn't. We saw Lord Cameron. Who saw that coming? Did you expect that?
No, and I just enjoyed your reaction so much. I did something with Sophie that evening, and we just played your reaction.
Unbelievable. I mean, did you not have the same reaction when you saw him?
Yes. I mean...
Anyway, going back to the point, is he the right Chancellor for the job, I suppose? There was some suggestion that he would be moved in the reshuffle. He wasn't. Obviously, the Prime Minister has faith in him.
Yeah, absolutely. And why wouldn't he? You're starting to see the economy do exactly what the Prime Minister set out at the beginning of the year, reducing debt, halving inflation, starting to see growth come through. And those are the key preconditions to benefit everybody. And you're starting to see that today with the national insurance cut, and you'll see more of that as we go through next year.
OK, final thought. What do you not want to see in the autumn statement today?
What do I not want to see? I suppose what the worst thing would be is if you saw something, some hit which you hadn't expected to the economy, but I'm not seeing that. The OBR numbers look good. And what I don't want to see is any move back anymore on some of the green moves we've made, which are great. I'd love to see something, a bit of a positive surprise on those today.
OK, it's good to see you, Stephen. Thanks.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. Have a quick look at these pictures. Here we go, just ahead of the weather. Where is that? Looks like somewhere in the Caribbean, doesn't it? It's not. It's just outside the mothership, outside Sky News in West London. Looks absolutely magnificent. The sun is rising on the Chancellor this morning. Will it still be shining on him come this evening? We'll have to wait and see. Meantime, what about the weather for the rest of us?
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rest of the week will be overall drier and less windy than recently, but it will turn noticeably colder by Friday. It's a mild start across the north, chilly in the south, early fog patches clearing. Ireland and northern parts of the UK will be rather cloudy through the morning with outbreaks of rain or drizzle. Wales will turn increasingly dull and damp. Elsewhere, it's going to be mainly dry with hazy spells of sunshine.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, if you've not had a look at your papers this morning, let me show you the King. He's down with the kids during a state banquet for the President of South Korea. Lots of pictures of Camilla and Kate in the papers this morning. Charles made several pop culture references while addressing the guests at Buckingham Palace. In attendance were the members of K-pop group Blackpink.
Korea has matched Danny Boyle with Bong Joon-ho, James Bond with Squid Game, and the Beatles' Let It Be with BTS's Dynamic, or Dynamite. I applaud Jenny, Jisoo, Lisa and Rosé, better known collectively as Blackpink, for their role in bringing the message of environmental sustainability to a global audience as ambassadors for the UK's presidency of COP26 and later as advocates for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I can only admire how they can prioritise these vital issues as well as being global superstars. Sadly, when I was in Seoul all those years ago, I'm not sure I developed much of what might be called the Gangnam style.
Ha-ha. Now, Chester Zoo has welcomed the birth of one of the world's rarest animals. There are only 600 left in the wild. Can you guess which one it is? Here he is, this little fella. Not that one. This one. There he is, just being born. Bless his cotton socks. It's the eastern black rhino, which is critically endangered. The female calf was safely delivered by New Momzuri earlier this month. Experts say it's quite unusual for a rhino to be born in daylight, and more than that, a black rhino. I could tell you all about why it's called a black rhino, but maybe I'll do that later on. And now, from land mammals to sea mammals, the first grey seal pup of the winter has been born on the North and Norfolk coast. The number of seals at Blakeney Point has grown drastically over the last 2 decades. Just 25 pup births were recorded at the beach back in 2001. It's thought 180 times that number will be born between now and mid-January. Later, we'll be joined by the National Trust to tell us more about those adorable pups. I think we've got a statement for you from the Foreign Secretary following the agreement reached by Israel and Hamas for a coordinated release of hostages and a pause in the fighting. This is what he said. This agreement is a crucial step towards providing relief to the families of the hostages and addressing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. I urge all parties to ensure the agreement is delivered in full. Still to come on the programme for you, speaking to the Israeli Defence Force spokesperson, and that's Peter Lerner.
A gloomy set of economic forecasts.
Households and businesses around the country are suffering.
We've got slower growth and yet higher inflation, so the worst of both worlds.
Where is that line going to go?
The bank predicted the UK economy would flatline.
And you begin to get a sense of how the economy is doing. Soggy.
It's a very challenging environment in the short term. Then we can be very confident of our future.
A lot of people come to us for well-being aspects. People who suffer from anxiety. We often get people who message me and say, I know someone that's autistic. I think they benefit from this. Other people really just love cows already and want to spend some time with them. The problem with cows is that they're so big. Generally, cows are quite inquisitive. They are, on the whole, very friendly. I mean, I would say don't just go and approach a cow in the field because you just never know. These are ones we've worked a lot with. We knew they were already friendly and confident. They're really used to seeing people now, and they do actually love the attention. They're really enjoying having people here to see them. This is Cuddle Puff. She's a British Blue Cross. The rest of our cuddle cows are dairy crosses. When we had dairy herd up to last year, we sold those because of the flooding in the area, and we kept these because we just couldn't bear to part with them. They were our friends. £40 at the moment, and that lasts about 2.5 hours. We meet the cuddle cows for about 3/4 of an hour, and then we meet our little Highlands as well. Really popular. We put tickets on sale, and we sell out usually within about half an hour. But we only take 6 people at once. There's three of us farmers, my husband, my brother, and myself. So one of us will just spend time with each couple, telling them about the cows, making sure everyone's safe. And making sure they have a really nice time.
Five of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Hello again, everybody. You're watching The Breakfast Show Wednesday morning. It's Autumn Statement Day today. What does that mean? Well, it means that the Chancellor is potentially going to give us some of our money back. Let's wait and see. Full coverage on Sky News just after PMQs, 12:40. Before that, our top stories this morning. Israel and Hamas agree to pause fighting for the release of 50 hostages being held in Gaza. Foreign Secretary David Cameron says this agreement is a crucial step and must be delivered in full. Hamas has said 150 Palestinian prisoners will be released from Israeli jails as part of the deal. And as I was saying, Chancellor preparing for his autumn statement where he is expected to announce a cut in national insurance for millions of workers. I want to update you further on what's happening in the Middle East and certainly what is predicted to happen potentially later on today. Let's see if we can find out. Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner from the Israeli Defence Forces with us. Lieutenant Colonel, always a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to join us on the programme. Tell us what you can about this hostage release.
Good morning, Kay. Since the beginning of the war, our efforts have been twofold. First of all, to dismantle and destroy Hamas, but second of all, to bring the hostages home. And indeed, the framework that's been produced over the last 24 hours and brought to the public's knowledge has been part of that. We are certain that without the efforts of the IDF over the last 6.5 weeks now, we would not have been at this point. So we're happy to see that the hostages be released. 236 hostages are being held by Hamas, unlawfully snatched from their bedrooms on the 7th of October on that terrible day. And this is just one step forward in order to bringing some peace to the families that have been ripped apart over the last 6 weeks. So this is a good step. It's a step that we are determined to achieve, and it goes hand in hand with our war efforts.
What more can you tell us about the release?
So the details of that are being managed by the diplomatic level and the political level. Our role in this is to hold fire, an operational pause. As the deal is produced, we will be in our positions, we will be standing strong and prepared, because we know Hamas have a dubious record with regard to holding fire in the past. They've utilized these types of pauses in the past to conduct more killing and abduction. So we need to be very strong in our defensive positions, but we are prepared. This is the reality that we will see how it develops over the next few days.
Will it be today?
I can't say. There's a judicial process that is going on in Israel that will be presented to the general public as part of our democracy. When people have problems with the government's decision, then there's the Supreme Court that people can appeal to, and that we'll have to see what happens. If the Supreme Court accepts or refutes those appeals, then if it refutes them or if it defers them, then it will go forward. I am on the operational side of maintaining the security and safety of the state of Israel. We will implement the government's direction to the letter, and that's our role in this, restoring safety and security to the people of Israel and bringing the hostages home.
What impact does it have on you personally and the men and women who serve with you when Palestinians who have been imprisoned are released as part of this sort of scheme?
So, of course, we have to keep in mind that Israel is doing everything in order to release hostages, innocents, men, women, children that have been held against their will unlawfully. And on the other hand, it is indeed convicted terrorists, people that have conducted acts against Israel and against Israelis. So, of course, there is an internal battle there. But the internal battle is, what is the price of an Israeli life? And we are determined to bring them home. This, I think, my personal perspective is not really relevant, but we have to bring the people home. That is, what we need to do. That's our goal. That's one of the goals of this war effort. And indeed, the families of the hostages expect nothing less from us.
So it's, I suppose, interpreting what you're saying there, Lieutenant Colonel, is that it's a heavy price, but it's one that you are happy to pay in order to get the hostages back.
I don't know if I would say happy. I think, though, if it's a necessity and the government is moving on. What we know is that Hamas, given the chance, will probably try and abduct more and kill more and murder more and rape more and butcher more. So we understand that this is the enemy that we have. This is precisely the reason that the government has instructed us to dismantle and destroy Hamas as a governing authority. So they don't have that power to wield and hold not only 236 Israelis hostage, but effectively the country, but also the 2 million Palestinians in Gaza hostage. So the reality is a reality that needs to change. It's a reality that we need to bring the hostages home. We need to utilize all of the tools, whether operational, intelligence, but also diplomacy, in order to bring some peace and take our security to a different level to make sure that this can never happen again.
And how is your team going to ensure that Israel keeps its part of the deal as far as making sure that humanitarian needs are met, the fuel that's needed for the hospitals, the food that's needed for those that have been displaced? What role will you have with that?
The humanitarian effort is one that is ongoing, and it goes hand in hand with the operational effort. What we've done is continue to increase the amount of humanitarian supplies going into Gaza. So we see an increase in the truckloads. I think yesterday it was more than 200 already. And this is a process that is increasing day by day. Of course, if there is a hold in the fire and if there is an operational standstill on the ground, then there will be easier to maneuver, mobilize more aid in and supply the goods and needs of the people who are not Israel's enemy, that the people of Gaza are not, and that is why this is a good step for them as well. At the end of the day, though, we need to realize that the situation on the ground is dictated by Hamas's actions. They chose to brutally launch a war against Israel on the 7th of October. They chose strategically to breach our border on over 20 positions. They launched into our communities, grabbed deep inside our soft underbelly, and snatched Israelis into Gaza and brutally massacred many others. So we need a balance of those, and we need to facilitate the humanitarian effort on one hand, but we also need to restore.
We only have a limited amount of time. We are sadly all too aware of what happened, the barbarism on the 7th of October. I just want to talk to you about ongoing events, if I may. Your claim Israeli soldiers have made it past the blast door into the tunnels under Al-Shifa Hospital. What did you find?
We continue to find the infrastructure that Hamas is utilizing in order to conduct its operations. They have operational rooms and more extensive network. It's a huge network of tunnels that has served their offensive activities against us and for their defensive capabilities from us. This is why it needs to be dismantled. It's why it needs to be destroyed. And this is precisely why we are operating in Al-Shifa Hospital. Now, this is how Hamas has, I would say, as a concept of operation, used all of the hospitals in Gaza to conduct these acts, these atrocities, putting the people of Gaza at more risk. And now we are in the process of revealing to the world exactly how they deeply embedded themselves under the people of Gaza, putting them at risk. This is precisely their modus operandi. This is precisely what they intended on doing. And this is precisely what we are revealing.
Lieutenant Colonel, I know that you're the man to clear this up for us. The video, the unedited video of what was happening underneath Al-Shifa Hospital that the IDF showed us shortly after you'd managed to penetrate those tunnels, as you put it. Colleagues at a news organisation here in the UK said that video had actually been edited. IDF said it hadn't been edited. What is the truth behind that?
When we distributed to Sky News and to the world media, we distributed two videos. In our distribution, we sent two different disconnected videos of two different cameras, one that went down and one that went through. Of course, on our social media, when we put them and compiled them together, but it was two different video shots that we announced. They weren't edited. They were just one from going in, as we can see, the one going down, and then one going along the 55-meter length tunnel to that blast door, the blast door that Hamas had erected in order to prevent an IDF advance. This is exactly what we've seen, and this is how we've revealed to the public, and it goes beyond those blast doors, as we shared with you yesterday, how we've opened that door.
Okay. Before I just let you go, Lieutenant Colonel, thank you for indulging us with your time this morning. If, by any miracle, all of the hostages are released over the next few days, will you still continue on with the war in Gaza after that?
I'm not aware of any change in our operational directive. I don't think there's a decision not to dismantle and destroy Hamas as a governing authority. I think it's clear to everybody, every decent person, that understands the brutality of this organization, the mercilessness of this organization, that they can't be allowed to maintain control over Gaza. So our goals and the directives dictated to us by the government, I'm not aware of any change in that. I still believe, and I think we all need to understand and believe, Hamas have to go, and they have to go as soon as possible.
Thank you for taking the time to join us, as I say. Hopefully we will have good news for the families today. Thank you.
Good day, Kay.
Former boss of ChatGPT, Sam Altman, is returning to the company that fired him just a week ago. What on earth is going on there? Tom is standing by for us. So, Tommy, he was fired last Friday. Basically, the board suggested for telling fibs. What's happened since?
Only in Silicon Valley, right, Kay? We don't know what's going on here. We don't know why he was pushed out, and we don't know why he's been. Well, we've got a bit of better idea of why he's been brought back. Sam Altman, of course, he's the boss of OpenAI. This is the company that I think we've got largely to thank for all of the excitement, all of the frenzy and the fear around the power of artificial intelligence, because they released on the world late last year the sort of very powerful ChatGPT based on this AI called GPT-4, which basically blew people away. We didn't realise these models could get quite this good, quite this quickly. And since then, others have gone public. There were all sorts of rumours swirling around as to why the board initially pushed him out, but no evidence of what's going on. No one's got any idea. I think even the AI that they developed couldn't answer. I just asked it, actually. I just typed into Bing, which is the Microsoft search engine that's powered by ChatGPT-4, why did OpenAI sack Sam Altman? We don't know. Here's some sources from the web. So we all know the AI knows little more than we do about it. Might have a lot to do with the fact, though, that this company was founded as a not-for-profit. It was very much in the interests of developing AI for humanity. It's now, of course, majority owned by Microsoft. They've invested $10 billion into the company and are working very closely with OpenAI to develop products. Is there difference of opinion over that? Were there differences in how Sam Altman would take the company forward or not? I think in other parts of the world, there might be some reputational worry about this. Does this make us look, might undermine trust or confidence in this as a corporation? This is Silicon Valley, remember, though, and I think really it's all about the products. The staff of OpenAI revolted. They were very upset. They said, we're going to walk if Sam Altman goes. Other board member also went with him in solidarity with Altman. And it looks like because of that, the product's the most important thing. The brains behind ChatGPT is the most important thing to investors. They've got to bring him back, and it appears that they have. Whether this new board will manage to hold the company together, they've chosen 4 new board members. We'll have to wait and see.
OK, lovely. People power influencing AI. Who would have thought it? Thanks very much, Tom. Thanks. Still to come, speaking to a policing expert to discuss criticism of Lancashire police over the disappearance of Nicola Bulley.
The pound has rallied. Moderation. Interest rates peaking.
I'm up at 6%.
The highest for 14 years.
Will that be the peak? Will it be a little bit lower?
Crisis.
It's closer to a potential crash.
So many words, so many meanings. But what do they mean for you and your finances? Stay up to date on Sky News.
I'm Adam Parsons. I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
More flares going off, a volley of rocks. Cobbles have been pulled up out and are being used as missiles to hurl at these police.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. We have now left Italy and entered France. Nobody's asked to check our identity. Made by people who dare to challenge.
Nice to see you again, Mr. Barnier. Why?
Meeting you. Fishing does have the potential to stymie an enormous economic deal. What strikes you when you come to this glacier is not just the way in which the environment is changing, but the speed at which those changes are happening.
It's devastating, actually.
Our regular police commentator, Graham Wetton, is here. Hi, so much to talk to you about. Can I start with what's happening in Wales? It breaks my heart to see the pictures of those 4 kids. I mean, so full of life and dead. The car overturned and it was partly submerged in water. Very difficult for the police.
Really difficult terrain. I actually looked at it last night when I was asked to come on here. So I actually looked at the road. The road itself is literally rural. It's a very narrow road. It's an A road, but literally through the parts of Wales, river on one side, deep, steep inclines, so towards the river. So really challenging environment to search. We know now where they were found, but for the police starting from a starting position of where they were last seen, they've got to check so many roads and so such a large area, such a huge terrain.
I think it was somebody in a tractor, actually, because
yeah,
they were higher up. So they
higher sided vehicle can see down to it.
Yeah, so how do the police start to deal with that sort of investigation? They hear from the family, I'm guessing?
Yeah, reported, my understanding, reported on the Monday. So they had, by the time it was reported, about 3 o'clock Monday. So you're then going into overnight searching in the dark. So you're searching in the dark and looking all night. Volunteer search teams had a huge response, is my understanding from the community and the search and rescue teams. Didn't find them overnight, and a high-sided vehicle found them. Yeah, it's just tragic. You're looking at those parents and boy similar age.
Yeah.
They go away, they go in their cars, they go with their friends, and you sit there waiting for a phone call that they've actually got there safely. So, yeah, tragic for everybody involved.
It is. Another tragedy that we covered extensively together was what happened to Nicola Bulley. There was an investigation into the way the police dealt with the investigation, if you will, and it reported back yesterday. There was some criticism for them.
Yeah, I heard it. I saw it reported yesterday. Words like highly critical, a heavily damning report. I haven't read it that way. I read the whole report, read it twice now, 140 pages, so it's quite extensive. About 14 pages of conclusions, 4 of recommendations, about half and half between Lancashire Constabulary and the College of Policing. There's some words like highly commended the investigation, search was of a high standard. So these words are all the way through the actual review. Review team have done an excellent job in pulling it all together. Very detailed and thorough review has been conducted into this. There was some criticism around the failure to declare it as a critical incident, which they should have done. I remember doing interviews on that, and I couldn't believe it wasn't a critical incident.
What does that mean?
It basically means it's such a broad definition. It's any incident where the effectiveness of the police response is likely to have a significant impact on the victim, the family, and/or the community. Clearly, this was having a significant impact. The effectiveness of the police response, so how it was perceived, how it was viewed, the fact there was no, and you were up there, no crime scene tent, no cordons around the actual area, around the bench. You were walking up and down the footpath, as many people were. It didn't look like the police were treating this seriously. It was a perception, it seems, from the public and from the media. The police were. The actual initial response was commended in the report. In fact, they had a high-risk missing person manager looking after the case from the very start, was commended and recognised in the review report. But from outside looking in, it didn't look like it was being treated maybe as seriously as people, the public, seem to think. So clearly, it met the definition for me of a critical incident and should have been declared as such. That may have put some people's fears or concerns at ease.
What about hearing about the fact that she had all sorts of struggles that she was dealing with? I mean, did we really need to know that?
No, the report says avoidable, unnecessary. I think that's probably the right balance. They're considered terms that they've used. And I think for me, when you read the entire report and you go through the background, the basis of it, that was wrong from the start. The initial press conference mentioned vulnerabilities or something, and I think the press picked up on that. Or they discounted any other issues. And I think, and you look at the media and policing aspects of this, I think the media realised there was a story, there was something they weren't being told. So they started to look even deeper into what the police weren't telling them. We then had the social media aspect, which just went literally off the scale for an investigation of this time. And I think it was very difficult for the local constabulary to deal with the volume of inquiries they had, with the resources and staff they had. They should have asked for more assistance, but to actually come out with those terms, when the press conference announced she had vulnerabilities, that actually posed more questions than it answered. And I think they had to come out with a further statement where they disclosed the actual conditions. That could have been dealt with a lot better, a lot more professionally if they'd had, and this doesn't happen enough these days, it's almost like off-the-record briefings with the journalists. Actually give them some information that can't be reported. This is what we can't say publicly, but now you know, and you can then structure, you can structure your reports.
A huddle, as we call it.
Yeah, you can structure your reports and what you're saying to the public because you know the background that the police have got. It was clear to me from the start there was something behind the scenes they knew which led them to have this working theory that she'd gone into the river, and they were proved correct in the end, but it was that basis that they didn't actually disclose. Social
media can be a source for good as well for police services up and down the country. The Met are using it at the moment. They've got a series of suspects that they want to know more about. Yeah, this comes from the protest, and I've done numerous interviews about the policing of the protests. It's very challenging to arrest people with such large numbers on the day. So there's always, or regularly, a post-event investigation. So they've been working round the clock to look through CCTV footage, look through body-worn footage from the officers deployed on the scene, identifying offences that have taken place, and then putting a public appeal out subsequently to identify suspects. So again, social media is used to great effect to identify these people, and they might have had significant results already in people either coming forward or being identified for committing offences, and they've charged quite a few already. So it can be a force for good, but this comes down to, again, and it's highlighted in the Bully report, the relationship between policing and the media, which since Leveson has taken a real hammering and I think needs to be rebuilt. How do we do that?
I think it comes down to trust.
We've only got 20 seconds, so...
Right, trust, quickly then, trust in both ways, because again, you've seen that this report has been reported very negatively in the media without much balance for me. There's some positives in it, so I think the media need to do a lot more, but so does policing.
Well, that's why we've got you on this morning, in order to be able to do that on behalf of your colleagues, former colleagues. It's good to see you, Graham. Thanks very much indeed. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rest of the week will be drier overall and less windy than of late, but it will turn noticeably colder by Friday. Mild start across the north, chilly in the south with early fog patches clearing. Ireland and northern parts of the UK will be rather cloudy through the morning with outbreaks of rain or drizzle. Wales will turn increasingly dull and damp.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Coming up in the next hour, live in Jerusalem as Israel and Hamas agree a deal to release hostages being held in Gaza. We're expecting 50 to be released over a number of days. When's it going to happen? Stay tuned on Sky. Morning, everybody. It is 8 o'clock. You're very welcome to join us on The Breakfast Show this Wednesday morning. The biggest diplomatic breakthrough of the war so far. Israel's cabinet has backed a deal with Hamas to secure the release of 50 hostages being held in Gaza. This hour, we'll hear from one family desperate for news of their loved ones who were taken on the 7th of October. It's Wednesday, the 22nd of November.
In the early hours of this morning, the Prime Minister's office in Israel announced that a deal had been agreed. 50 Israeli women and children will be released over a 4-day period. And this morning, the Israeli military have told us that they support the deal.
We have to bring the people home. That is, what we need to do. That's our goal.
Hamas says the deal will also see 150 Palestinian prisoners released from Israeli jails. Also ahead, tributes to 4 teenagers found dead in an upturned vehicle as police continue their investigations. Chancellor expected to announce a cut to national insurance for millions of workers in today's autumn statement.
Huge day for the government today as Cabinet will be meeting behind me in Downing Street to discuss the autumn statement.
Former boss of ChatGPT, Sam Altman, returning to the company that fired him less than a week ago. And the pitter-patter of tiny hooves. They're celebrating the arrival of one of the world's rarest animals at Chester Zoo, an eastern black rhino. Telling you more about the hostages in just a second. Also taking you to Downing Street, where Murray is this morning, because we're going to be hearing from the Chancellor. Murray.
Yes, good morning, Kay. Big day for the government. This is the day where they set the tone for the next general election, but also where Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt prove their credentials as low-tax Conservatives.
On that from Mari momentarily. Meantime, let's take you to Israel. Alistair standing by for us with the latest on the hostage release, hoping against hope that that's going to happen today. Alistair, what more do we know?
Good morning, Kay. Well, over the last few weeks, there have been intense negotiations behind the scenes involving the Americans and the Qataris trying to find an agreement between Hamas and Israel. But every time it looked like we might be getting close to a deal, something intervened and prevented it from happening. It's been an agonizing wait for the families. But last night, the Israeli cabinet met for protracted negotiations. And then in the early hours of this morning, around 3 a.m., a statement from the office of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirming a deal has been agreed. Israel's government met for 3 hours, late into the evening at the country's defense ministry, before announcing its support for the hostage deal. Families and friends have had 6 weeks waiting in a vacuum of information for this moment. The agreement is for 50 women and children to be released over a 4-day pause in the fighting. At the same time, more humanitarian aid and fuel will go into Gaza.
I don't know. I hope they're okay, but we don't know nothing.
The agreement will also see 150 Palestinian prisoners released from Israeli jails. Israelis, whose lives may have been affected by those Palestinians, now have 24 hours to object to the deal. And that is a cause for concern for families and supporters of the hostages.
I'm really worried because the deal is talking mainly about children. And this is just absurd that children are involved in this fight, in this war. We have to bring the children back now as top priority, no matter what.
But there is now a chance to bring home some, if not all, of the women and children being held in Gaza, like Cherie Bibas and her little boys Ariel and baby Kafir, the youngest of the hostages, only 10 months old. And Amelia, abducted with her mother Danielle and her twin cousins Julie and Emma, seized with their parents Sharon and David. There are thought to be as many as 90 women and children being held in Gaza. The deal could be extended by a day for every 10 extra hostages. that Hamas agrees to release. But the Israeli government insists the fighting will eventually resume as they work to eliminate Hamas.
Ali, we'll be hearing from the Israeli Defence Force in just a moment on their take on this, but there's still some diplomatic moves that need to be put in place before this happens. Is that right?
That's right. Under Israeli law, they now have to give Israeli citizens 24 hours to object, if they are minded to do so, to the release of any of the Palestinian prisoners that the Israelis have put forward for release. And the Israelis have just this morning released a list of 300 Palestinians that could be eligible for release. Most of them are under the age of 19 and they're in prison for offences like throwing rocks at Israeli military or Israeli police. So we'll see whether or not that delays the deal. The expectation is that it won't. In the cabinet, there was not unanimous agreement for this deal, particularly amongst some of the far-right coalition members who opposed it. But ultimately, the war cabinet did agree it, and so did the security establishment in Israel. And as we've just heard from the Israeli Defense Forces, they are supportive as well.
Israel is doing everything in order to release hostages, innocents, men, women, children that have been held against their will unlawfully. And on the other hand, it is indeed convicted terrorists, people that have conducted acts against Israel and against Israelis. So, of course, there is an internal battle there. But the internal battle is, what is the price of an Israeli life? And we are determined to bring them home. This I think, my personal perspective is not really relevant, but we have to bring the people home. That is, what we need to do. That's our goal. That's one of the goals of this war effort.
Hamas say that Israel has agreed to stop all surveillance flights over southern Gaza during this truce and pause for 6 hours every day surveillance flights over northern Gaza. We believe, though, Israeli troops are on the ground in northern Gaza will remain there. There will be this surge of humanitarian aid into the south as well. And no doubt the international pressure for a ceasefire, a longer-term ceasefire, will increase over the coming days. And so it will be very interesting to see how the dynamic and the reality of the military operation on the ground in Gaza changes as a result of this deal.
OK, for now, thank you. 4 young people who will not be coming home are youngsters that were in a vehicle that upturned in Snowdonia over the weekend. Let's get more with Shingy, should we? What happened, Shingy?
Well, morning, Kay. 4 families will be trying to come to terms with the worst news imaginable after that discovery yesterday of 4 bodies in the search for a group of teenagers who drove from Shropshire to Snowdonia for a camping trip over the weekend. Their silver Ford Fiesta was found submerged in water, and we're stood on the A road where the incident took place, a bit further along the road. And as you can see behind me, it's a narrow rural residential road. It's got a river running alongside it, and we know that weather conditions were incredibly difficult on Sunday, so it's understandable to see why they may have got into difficulty. The police have said that investigations into why the car left the road are ongoing, but this is a kind of incident that just leaves with it a long tail of trauma. We know that tributes have been pouring in overnight from Shrewsbury, where the boys went to college, as well as here in the local community, where someone has left a single candle on the wall just to try and mark the boys' lives and pay their respects after a truly awful incident.
For now, thank you. Those poor families. In other news, England's Chief Medical Officer, Sir Chris Whitty, has told the COVID inquiry that with the benefit of hindsight, the first lockdown came a bit too late. And he said that allowing mass gatherings such as the Cheltenham Festival in the early days of the pandemic was logically incoherent. His former deputy, Jonathan Van Dam, is due to be giving evidence today. New research has found that some hospital disinfectants are no more effective at killing off a superbug than water. Scientists at the University of Plymouth found that bleach, which is used to clean hospital scrubs and surfaces, does not kill a bacteria which infects millions of people every year. Experts are warning that without new disinfectants and guidelines, staff and patients will be at risk. And the TV and radio presenter Annabel Giles has died 4 months after being diagnosed with a brain tumour. Her children revealed the news, calling the 64-year-old an incredible mother and truly one of a kind on social media. The presenter was perhaps best known for presenting the 1990s ITV fashion show Posh Frocks and New Trousers. Darren Jones is here for the opposition this morning. I bet you were a big fan of that programme, weren't you? I'm not going to ask you. I'm not going to test you. Don't worry. I am going to ask you about what you want to hear from the Chancellor today.
Well, a plan that's going to fix the last 13 years of Conservative failure would be nice.
What does that look like?
Well, it looks like a Labour government, to be honest, Kay. I'm not
Well, he's not going to do that. So
no. Well, I mean, you know, there's a whole host of things that we would want to see. We welcome the suggestion there'll be a tax cut for working people. We've been calling for that in the Labour Party for some time. But the fact of the matter is that, on average, people are paying £4,000 more a year in tax under the Conservatives. And so a couple of £100 off a year will be good, but they're still going to be down £3,500 a year. And at a time when the government's taking more money from us than ever before, people at home will be asking, well, what am I getting for that money when public services are on their knees and the economy is not heading in the right direction?
We believe a huge increase, relatively, in the minimum wage. They're starting to chip away at you.
Well, the Labour Party introduced the national minimum wage. We support it.
They're boosting it.
And we support
highest in a decade.
We support that. Mm-hmm. We support that because we know that people on the lowest wages have been struggling during the cost of living crisis. But inflation is still double what it needs to be. The cost of living crisis is still an issue for many families across the country, not least in respect to the food bill and their energy bills. And so, you know, a quid and a bit increase in national minimum wage is good.
10%.
Great. Welcome that. But we need to see much more action on getting down energy bills, more action on tackling inflation and more action on the cost of living crisis.
Were you taken in by what people now seem to suggest was flying a kite when it came to inheritance tax? It doesn't look as though that is likely to even have a sniff in this autumn budget.
Well, it's always been flying kites on everything every other day, and you've been asking me every week what I would do about each one of them. Mm-hmm. And that's why I've said in the past, let's wait and see to see what they say on Wednesday. I mean, there's been so much pre-briefing.
Not saying that this morning.
Well,
you're biting this morning.
Well, I'm just trying to be helpful. I mean, there's been so much pre-briefing. I'm not sure what's left to say, and we're going to need to wait and see what the budget says later this afternoon. But the fact of the matter is, all too little, too late. 13 years of Conservative economic failure. People know at home that on every measure, inflation, cost of living, national debt, tax, the direction the country's going in, the Tories have failed, and they're just not going to be able to turn it around at this stage.
OK, perhaps you could be helpful with this as well then. How good is this Chancellor compared to other Conservative Chancellors?
Well, look, the Conservatives have been quite good in the past at saying that when they get a new Prime Minister or a new Chancellor, and I've lost track of how many they've had now in the last 13 years, that it's kind of year zero for them. I mean, that's an unacceptable answer. 13 years of Conservative failure is a consequence of 13 years of the Conservative Party failing. So, you know, whilst I buy the argument and there's legitimacy to it that Jeremy Hunt is, you know, more capable than Kwasi Kwarteng, the fact is people are paying more tax, paying more for their mortgage. The country's heading in the wrong direction because of 13 years of the Conservative Party failing. I'm less interested in the personalities and more interested in the fact the Conservative Party have been so hopeless over the last decade.
Good news coming from the Middle East today.
Great news, and it'll be a huge relief to the families involved to know that some of their loved ones will be coming home. It's good news that more aid will be able to get into Gaza as part of this long humanitarian pause. But it's clearly been stated by both Israel and Hamas, this is not an end to the war in the Middle East, and so there's more work to do.
I'm sure you've been monitoring what's been happening with the COVID inquiry. So Chris Whitty, they got a little bit testy with him on occasion. Yesterday, he was on the stand, if that's what we call it, all day. He talked about the first lockdown. He said that we went into that a little bit too late. We're going to be hearing from Jonathan Van Tam later on today. Listening to what we've heard, it's basically raking over the coals. Do we really need this amount of money spent on an inquiry?
Inquiries such as this are important on the basis that by the end of it, you learn some lessons. We all know that lots of Conservative ministers, whether Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, Matt Hancock as Health Secretary or others, were not prepared, were inadequate in their performance, dubious questions about their ethics and morals. We all know that because we lived it through the time. And the inquiry is, you know, revisiting a lot of that, fine, but the test for success for the inquiry is how do we make sure that if we face a similar challenge in the future, the government, the country is better prepared to deal with that than it was in the past.
Years away, though, isn't it, those conclusions?
It is. It takes time to go through all of them. I mean, there are WhatsApp messages, documents, lots of witnesses. If you're going to do this properly, I know from when I used to run select committees, you get huge amounts of evidence. It takes time to get through it properly. It's right they have the time to do so.
Have you turned on your disappearing messages on your WhatsApp?
I don't think I know how to.
I'll help you.
Thank you.
OK, it's great to see you. Thank you. Looking at other news for you, the Chancellor, just hearing there about the autumn statement. Have we got Mari standing by? Yes, we do. There she is. She's at Downing Street for us this morning. What did you hear? What make of what we heard from Darren Jones this morning? Good morning to you.
Morning, Kay. Yes, well, Darren Jones really trying to say that it's too little too late for the Conservative Party to turn things around. His argument was very much 13 years of catastrophe can't be undone today by an autumn statement that, as far as the Labour Party would be seeing as not really touching the sides and not going far enough. Now, he did welcome tax cuts for working people. The Labour Party have always said they want the tax burden to reduce on working people, but nonetheless they are sceptical about exactly what that's going to look like and whether it will go far enough. Now, we are expecting a cut to the national insurance tax today, potentially a 1% cut on that, and there's still lots of speculation around other tax cuts such as business tax cuts, which we know are definitely coming, but in what form we're not quite sure. But as the Labour Party were saying, and also the Resolution Foundation, a think tank, have also been saying in the past day or two that actually even a tax cut like the one we're expecting on national insurance actually won't necessarily benefit people that much because the thresholds for those taxes have been frozen, and therefore we get what we call stealth taxes or fiscal drag, and people are dragged into new tax brackets without actually raising taxes. So I think the key will be looking at the detail when it comes to the freezing of the thresholds and whether these tax cuts actually give you a financial benefit at the end of the day.
OK, for now, thank you. From 11 this morning, Sophie, we'll have full coverage of the autumn statement, where she'll be joined by our political and economic experts. Still to come on the programme for you this morning. 8:30, we'll bring you, we'll be speaking to one family desperate for news of relatives taken hostage by Hamas and hoping for their safe return. And at 8:45, joined by a professor of immunology to discuss the latest developments. That is in the COVID inquiry, of course. Before that, though, the number of animals being abandoned by their owners has risen to a 3-year high. Now there's a warning from the RSPCA that pets face a bleak winter due to the ongoing cost of living crisis. Here's Alice.
These cats once had homes and owners. Now they've been deserted as the cost of living bites.
Vet fees are going up, pet food is going up, pet toys are going up, and unfortunately we're finding more and more people are deciding to abandon their animals.
Terra Lucio is one of them. She was taken in by the RSPCA after her owner couldn't afford the vet fees when she fell from a building. It's a similar story for all these cats.
Where's he going? Where's he going?
The pandemic caused a surge in demand for dogs as people were at home and looking for companionship. Unfortunately, that's contributed to this current situation, as there's now more owners struggling with the costs of having a dog.
The RSPCA say more than 18,000 animals have been abandoned so far this year, but they're not the only organisation that are noticing how the cost of living is impacting owners and animals across the country.
The Blue Cross works directly with food banks to provide pet food for owners who can't afford it.
Because of a whole number of circumstances, and the cost of living being one of them, our shelves are empty, and so we're having requests from our food bank partners, and we're not able to wholly fulfil those requests.
Terra Lucio now has a new home, but thousands of pets across the country are not so lucky, and with inflation remaining high, the worry is that the situation may simply get worse. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Former boss of ChatGPT, Sam Altman, is returning to the company that fired him less than a week ago. Why? Let's find out. Artie standing by for us. Hi, Artie. So they sacked him for fibbing. He got a job at Microsoft, and now they've offered him his job back.
Exactly. On the face of it, it looks like OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, is back where it was 5 days ago. But in reality, behind the scenes, things are actually very different. And to understand what's going on, the main thing you need to understand is the fact that OpenAI was actually set up as a non-profit company back in 2015. So this means that the board members that initially dismissed Sam Altman, their duty is to ensure the safe generation of AI and to make sure that any AI that is generated by the company is broadly beneficial to the public. Now, this is different to the mission of most corporate boards, which is usually just to maximize the value for shareholders. So if we look at then what does that mean for the decisions they've made in the last few days, we still don't know exactly what happened and what Sam Altman was, in their words, not candid about. But what has been clear in the last few days is that a key player in this power struggle has been Microsoft. Now, they own about 49% of the company, and they were only thought to have been made aware minutes before the announcement was made public that Sam Altman was to be dismissed. They've not been happy about this. They've offered jobs to both Sam Altman and his co-founder, Greg Brockman, who left the company in solidarity, and to more than 700 OpenAI employees who were looking to move from the company and go to Microsoft in an act of resistance. And so after all of this upheaval, it looks like we might be back where we started. But really, the question remains about the OpenAI and how they're going to be able to play the commercial interests of Microsoft and the influence that it has over the company, but also the duty that they were set up for and the public good that they are bound to.
OK, for now, thank you. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Rest of the week will be overall drier and less windy than of late, but it will turn noticeably colder by Friday. It's a mild start across the North, chilly in the south with early fog patches clearing. Ireland and Northern Ireland and northern parts of the UK will be rather cloudy through the morning with outbreaks of rain or drizzle. Wales will turn increasingly dull and damp as well. Elsewhere, it'll be mainly dry with hazy spells of sunshine.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Let's find out what's going to happen with the COVID inquiry today. Yesterday, we heard from Sir Chris Whitty. Today is the turn of a chap that was probably known by his initials more than anything else during the pandemic, JVT. Who's that? She's standing by for us. Tell us more. Morning.
Good morning. Well, Professor Chris Whitty, Sir Chris Whitty, will continue to give evidence this morning. He's here already. He was here earlier at about 8 a.m. this morning. And in the last few moments, yes, you're right, Professor JVT, he is here. Jonathan Van Tam has arrived. Now, what will be interesting today is yesterday, Professor Sir Chris Whitty was asked about any divergence in the scientific community. Whether we were told the day before that the Chief Medical Officer, Sir Patrick Vallance, Chris Whitty, were in disagreement at what time the country should lock down, when it should lock down. Chris Whitty thought they should go later, and Sir Patrick Vallance thinking they should go earlier. We were told yesterday in the evidence that Sir Chris Whitty was listening to Professor Jonathan Van Tam, who was monitoring the situation in China, and he alerted the government very early on in January that there was this virus outbreak in China. He was potentially concerning. And then he told the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, who didn't think at that time in January that it was an emergency which required urgent intervention. In other words, those NPIs that we've talked about, those non-pharmaceutical interventions, and moving the country into lockdown. He said, let's wait and see. And he was probed on that again and again and again by Hugo Keith, QC, KC, and saying, don't you think, in retrospect, it was a mistake? He said, no. Given the evidence I had at the time, the data I had at the time, it was the right decision to make. So it will be interesting to see today whether Professor Jonathan Van Tam disagrees with his Chief Medical Officer and says today to the inquiry that he thinks the country should have moved earlier. So we'll be looking for some tension there. But yesterday, certainly, Sir Chris Whitty sticking to his line, as he has done throughout the pandemic, that he acted according to the evidence presented to him and that he was not responsible for making decisions. It was his job as a Chief Medical Officer to present the data and the science to the government, and they, as the politicians, had to take those difficult decisions.
OK, for now, thank you. Now let's tell you about something that's happening at Chester Zoo. It's welcomed the birth of one of the world's rarest animals. It says 600 left. I'm sure it's 6,000 left in the wild. Can you guess which one it is? There he is. He's just being born. He's a black rhino. They are critically endangered in the wild. The female calf was safely delivered by new mum Zuri earlier this month. Experts say it's quite unusual for a rhino to be born in daylight. Black rhinos are much, much, much more aggressive than a more docile white or square-lipped rhino. So if you ever see one, stay out of its way, even if they're that size. Top tip on The Breakfast Show this Wednesday morning. And from land mammals to sea mammals, the first grey seal pups of the winter season have been born on the North Norfolk coast. The number of seals at Blakeney Point has grown drastically over the last 2 decades. Just 25 pup births were recorded at the beach back in 2001. It's thought 180 times that number will be born between now and mid-July. Still to come on the programme for you. We're going to be speaking to a man whose relatives have been taken by Hamas. And King Charles shows off his pop culture knowledge. Well, kinda, sorta.
A gloomy set of economic forecasts.
Households and businesses around the country are suffering.
We've got slower growth and yet higher inflation, so the worst of both worlds.
Where is that line going to go?
The bank predicted the UK economy would flatline.
And you begin to get a sense of how the economy is doing. Soggy.
It's a very challenging environment in the short term. Then we can be very confident of our future.
A lot of people come to us for well-being aspects, people who suffer from anxiety. We often get people who message me and say, I know someone that's autistic, I think they benefit from this. Other people really just love cows already and want to spend some time with them. The problem with cows is that they're so big. Generally, cows are quite inquisitive. They are, on the whole, very friendly. I mean, I would say don't just go and approach a cow in the field because you just never know. These are ones we've worked a lot with. We knew they were already friendly and confident. They're really used to seeing people now, and they do actually love the attention. They're really enjoying having people here to see them. This is Cuddle Puff. She's a British Blue Cross. The rest of our cuddle cows are dairy crosses. Well, we had dairy herd up to last year. We sold those because of the flooding in the area, and we kept these because we just couldn't bear to part with them. They were our friends. £40 at the moment, and that lasts about 2.5 hours. We meet the cuddle cows for about 3/4 of an hour, and then we meet our little Highlands as well. Really popular. We put tickets on sale, and we sell out usually within about half an hour. But we only take 6 people at once. There's three of us farmers, my husband, my brother, and myself. So one of us will just spend time with each couple, telling them about the cows, making sure everyone's safe. And making sure they have a really nice time.
5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Hello again, everybody. You're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News, telling you about King Charles momentarily. Before that, though, Israel and Hamas have agreed to pause fighting for the release of 50 hostages being held in Gaza. Israel's military tells this programme they'll do everything they can to return people home. According to Hamas, 150 Palestinian prisoners will be released from Israeli jails as part of the deal. And the Chancellor is preparing for his autumn statement, where he's expected to announce a cut to national insurance for millions of workers. Well, we're told the US was heavily involved in brokering the agreement, and it has been hailed by President Biden, who says he is extremely gratified. James Husmore.
For the president, it was personal. That was certainly the tone struck in a White House statement late last night. It reads in part, Jill, his wife, and I have been keeping all those held hostage and their loved ones close to our hearts. I'm extraordinarily gratified, he says, that some of those brave souls will be reunited with their families. He's a man who does empathy, and he's doing it there. US officials speak about an afternoon inside the White House, a gut-wrenching episode in which he conducted a Zoom call, the president, with families of hostages taken. It was after that that he became personally and directly involved in the delicate process to get us to where we are today. Amongst the American hostages taken is one of the youngest. That's 3-year-old Abigail Edan. It's her 4th birthday on Friday. Her family spoke to Sky News last week about her ordeal, told how she was orphaned. Both parents were killed in the October 7th attack. She ran to a neighbour's house and with those neighbours was taken hostage. Her family are hoping that she will be amongst the first 50 to be released. And of course, that first 50 may not be the last. American officials are talking about how the structure of this deal, with the potential future exchanges of a day's halt in hostilities in return for further releases of hostages, they're calling that a deal incentivized to have everybody released.
Let's cross to the Philippines and speak to Ahal Basore. Some of his family were killed by Hamas on the 7th of October. Others are being held hostage. Thank you for joining us on the programme. We are hearing that potentially hostages will be released over the coming days. What are you being told?
To be honest, officially not much, but we are fed, by what the government is saying and by the news. Apparently there will be 50 mothers and children below 18 that will be released. I have a nephew who is 17 and a niece who is 13, and the father held by Hamas. My sister, unfortunately, was murdered by the terrorist on October 7th. She's no longer alive.
Do you know the circumstances under which they were taken and murdered on the 7th of October?
A little bit. So they were hiding in the safety room in their house. The terrorist broke in, set the house on fire. I actually visited the house myself. It was totally and utterly burnt down. They were forced out of the safety room. They were seen being dragged alive, all of them out of the house. So we initially assumed that they're all alive. And then 10 days later, there were 120 bodies pulled out of the kibbutz Be'eri. This is where I was born. My dad, 2 sisters still live. And 2 days later, we were informed that my sister's body was one of the bodies that were pulled out and that she's dead. And then we got confirmation that her husband and 2 children are held hostage. And another peculiarity of all this is, that they will be released, but the dead will stay behind. So it seems to me like a very sort of sadistic way to handle it by these Hamas terrorists. Just my view.
Am I right? Yeah. Am I right in saying that you were actually speaking to your sister during the attack on the 7th of October?
So I spoke to her. So when this all happened and I realized that it's more than just a missile attack, I called both my dad, my sister, and my middle sister, my younger sister. When I spoke last to Yonat, this is the name of my younger sister, she basically said, Ahali, I cannot talk, there are terrorists around, and, hang up the phone on me. This is a daughter, this is Alma, my niece. She's now somewhere on a panel somewhere in Gaza. So, we were very hopeful initially, and now even with this announcements and jubilation, if you like, around the release, still I'm afraid to be hopeful, which is a very sort of a sad state of affairs, because I just don't trust Hamas at all, and until they are home and safe, I think they can still conduct so many manipulation and so many ways to aggrieve us even further. Like breaching the ceasefire, like they did in 2014 and killed Adar Goldin and took his body. There is no end to this, so I want to be hopeful, but, I'm just afraid, I'm afraid, that after this, if something goes wrong, it will be another low point, and there's been enough of this.
How, obviously, your family probably better than most people. How do you think they will be coping, being taken in the brutal way that they were, but also knowing that their wife and mum was killed?
I suspect, I have no verification of it, but, I suspect that my sister might have been killed in front of them. Maybe they tried to do something to the daughter or to the son, and, she's feisty sort of a lady, or was, and maybe she confronted the terrorists and they shot her in front of the kids and her husband. So now they are coming by themselves, knowing the dead is being left behind, not knowing if he will ever come back as well, coming back to a family with no mother. I think it would be extremely difficult circumstances for them to get over, if ever you get over of something of this magnitude. You really need to be tough, or close so many doors inside your heart forever in order to cope with something so terrible.
What will you say to them when you see them again?
I will cry. I will hug them. I tell them that I'm sorry for what happened. I tell them that I love them. Something like that.
Maybe as soon as this week that you see them again. I sincerely hope that that does happen for you. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us. I really hope that you're reunited with them before too long. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Deputy Chief Medical Officer to the government throughout the pandemic, that's Sir Jonathan Van Tam, will give evidence today in front of the COVID inquiry. Yesterday, the former, in fact, he's still the Chief Medical Officer, I think, Professor Chris Whitty, told the inquiry he believed the first lockdown in March 2020 came a bit too late. Professor of Immunology at Imperial College London, Danny Altman, is with us now. Hi, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining us. What are you making of the evidence of the COVID inquiry so far?
I think it's been very good and poignant and important. Yeah, we've been through this enormous trauma of 232,000 dead, and I think we owe it to ourselves to really explore it properly and bottom it out. And I think that's been done terribly well. Yeah.
Anything in particular that you heard from Chris Whitty yesterday?
Well, I think it was very sobering in a number of ways. Chris and Patrick are two of the leading medics of their generation, and we're really the right people.
Balance.
Yeah, Patrick Balance, the right people in the right place at the right time. And, I think he said a number of poignant and sobering things, didn't he? So the thing he said, well, I can't remember the details, about how coming into it, realising that there could be hundreds of thousands of deaths, there wasn't really the sort of the urgency and the, electrification of sort of appreciating this on board in the way that there would have been if it was a terrorist attack or a tsunami or something. And, we weren't mentally in the right place for it and perhaps suffered for that. That, to me, was very poignant.
I'm guessing that you've got a view, I'm sure you will have, on the view on long COVID and the fact that the then Prime Minister said, long COVID, don't believe it. I mean, you think very much otherwise.
So, I've spent my life 7 days a week over the last 3 years working on COVID and long COVID and interacting a lot with the 1.7, 1.8 million people in Britain who have long COVID. And, they've paid a very high price for those enormous waves of COVID that we had in this country. And many of them still don't have their lives back to normal, don't have their employment back to normal. And it's really, hitting home now, the long-term disability that they have. So, yes, it felt very tough and I suppose very hurtful to them to see it sort of dismissed with sort of rude words scrawled across the briefing. It wasn't quite the level of seriousness that it needed.
And talk to us about long COVID. How does it manifest itself? I have a friend whose gut is struggled significantly since he had COVID.
Yeah, I know. It's, so as you know, and it's a big deal, isn't it? So as I said, millions of people...
Changed his life forever.
Absolutely changes your life, changes everything. So, we have a big study going at Imperial College where we have clusters of people. Some of them are more neurocognitive and brain fog. Some of them are more gastrointestinal, like your friend. Some of them are more wheezing and breathlessness. Some of them post-exertional, post-exercise exhaustion. And there are many, many different mechanisms hypothesized for it, but it's a real thing and it's a big thing. And it's an enormous oncoming burden.
Does it come to an end?
Yes and no. So we've got some people getting better, and the sobering news is that I looked into people who treated people 22 years ago from SARS-1 and said, what became of your long-term patients? And the news was horrible. Many of them never got better, never got their jobs back, and never went back to normal. So it's, it's so something to take seriously because it's a huge burden for those people and a huge oncoming burden for the NHS.
So what would you have said to the former Prime Minister as he was scrawling rude words across news of long COVID?
I guess, as Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitty seem to have tried to do, I'd have just tried to use my medical knowledge to explain it as best I could and hope I got a good reception.
Do you think when there is another pandemic, we are better prepared for it now?
I think that's the key question, isn't it? For me, that's what this inquiry is all about and why it's important that it's a good inquiry, and I think it is so far, because there will be another one in 5 to 10 years. And we so need to learn the lessons. At the moment, I don't feel like we really have. We so need to.
What do you want to be the outcome of this very lengthy, very expensive investigation?
I think so. What it's not about is kind of finger pointing or blame. What it's about is saying that when you face something like this, the margins are very, very fine, and the cost is very, very high in terms of deaths. And we need to look at every single detail and work out what we could have done better. And I'm hopeful we might do that.
In the fullness of time.
Yeah.
And how worried are we about COVID now, going forward?
Well, so, I'm by nature of my work.
You've had it, I'm guessing.
I've had it, and I'm by nature of my work and the people I see every day with long COVID, I feel rightly at the kind of cautious end of the spectrum, as in it's still around us, it's still percolating in people's lungs across the world, new variants coming up with new shockers for us in the future. So why wouldn't I be concerned?
Good to see you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. Still to come on the programme for you after the break, I'll be speaking to a professor of... in fact, I've just been talking to you, haven't I? So I don't know why it says that. Immunology at Imperial College. We heard quite a lot about the COVID inquiry. We'll have the latest on that. And also we'll be taking you to Downing Street to talk about the autumn statement.
pound has rallied. Moderation. Interest rates peaking
up at 6%.
The highest for 14 years.
Will that be the peak? Will it be a little bit lower?
It's closer to a potential crash.
So many words, so many meanings. But what do they mean for you and your finances? Stay up to date on Sky News.
I'm Adam Parsons. I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
More flares going off, a volley of rocks, cobbles have been pulled up out and are being used as missiles to hurl at these police.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. We have now left Italy and entered France. Nobody's asked to check our identity. Made by people who dare to challenge.
Nice to see you again, Mr. Barnier. Why? Meeting you.
Fishing does have the potential to stymie an enormous economic deal. What strikes you when you come to this glacier is not just the way in which the environment is changing, but the speed at which those changes are happening.
It's devastating, actually.
Hello again. There's some stuff in the papers today about millennials and what sort of words they use that older people absolutely detest. The king getting in on the act yesterday, getting down with the kids during a state banquet for the president of South Korea. He made several pop culture references while addressing the guests at Buckingham Palace. In attendance were the members of K-pop group Blackpink.
Korea has matched Danny Boyle with Bong Joon-ho, James Bond with Squid Game, and the Beatles' Let It Be with BTS's Dynamic, or Dynamite. I applaud Jenny, Jisoo, Lisa and Rosé, better known collectively as Blackpink, for their role in bringing the message of environmental sustainability to a global audience as ambassadors for the UK's presidency of COP26 and later as advocates for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I can only admire how they can prioritise these vital issues as well as being global superstars. Sadly, when I was in Seoul all those years ago, I'm not sure I developed much of what might be called the Gangnam style.
Ed's here to talk about the autumn statement. I said, I'm just going to ask you about some of these words, and he gave me that look that Ed gives me, so which means that I'm even more determined to ask him. So these are words that millennials say that we absolutely detest. You're nodding, oh, maybe you are a millennial.
I'm like out by a few months.
Okay, yeah, me too.
But I mean, like, look at me, I'm not a millennial, am I? Come on.
Amazeballs, rather splendid.
I mean, I've heard it.
Hollybobs? Do you not know what hollybobs mean?
Yeah, no, I know what it means.
Oh, okay.
It's just like,
a stupid word. Okay, but what I didn't know...
holiday.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know what hot girl summer meant.
No, don't know.
No, I didn't know that. Confident after a breakup.
That's what hot girl summer is?
That's what a hot girl summer is.
Okay, all right.
Bossing it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today after
with
the
my
autumn
link
statement.
to you. There you go.
That is the plan. We're going to be bossing it. We're going to have charts everywhere. We're going to tell you what's going on. We're going to kind of read through a lot of the numbers because there's particularly with the autumn statement, there's lots of numbers that need to actually kind of be pieced apart, and it's going to be kind of a slightly complicated day because we've had so much briefing, haven't we, ahead of this one?
Yeah, but how much of it is true?
Well, I think the early stuff, I think there was a bit of a dummy. I don't know what the millennial phrase would be.
I'll look it up. Yeah.
But there was a bit of a dummy with that all that inheritance tax stuff about how there was going to be a cut of inheritance tax. And I think part of the...
Bants.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, bants.
OK. Gosh. Didn't think I'd be talking
it
in
won't
that
be like
language.
this with Sophie later.
No. Well, I think Sophie is a millennial. When I think they were doing that, there was a lot of... They were kind of reading the pitch, weren't they? Because I think they knew, that maybe what they have is going to be... It's going to be moderately interesting, I think. I don't think this is going to be kind of massively game-changing. There's going to be a lot of noise. There's going to be a lot of talk about tax cuts. But the key thing to watch out for is that chart that shows the overall tax burden. And perhaps I can show it to you in the next hour.
Please.
It is going up to the highest levels since 1948, even before 1948. So the overall tax burden, not just for us, for our income taxes, national insurance, VAT, all of that, but also for businesses, it's going up and up and up. And it's partly because those tax rates, the kind of threshold at which you start paying tax, those have been frozen. It's a massive tax rise. It's called, economists call it fiscal drag, but basically it means when your wages go up, you end up paying more and more tax proportionately. When you take all of that into account, this has been a massively tax increasing government, massively, more than almost any other government in recent history. And so whatever they do today, it's very unlikely to change that big picture. So we're going to be looking at that, but we're going to be looking at the nature of some of these changes. The full expensing. So that sounds like kind of quite a boring thing, but actually it's quite a big deal. It means if you're a business, you can potentially offset a lot of the stuff that you're buying, machinery, things like that, against your tax bill. It could well help investment in this country. But again, there are big questions over whether people want to invest right now because they've had so much instability in the UK over the past few years. So there's actually kind of quite a lot going on. But generally speaking, autumn statements aren't supposed to be as big a deal as the budget. But I think as, we're moving into election
That's what
mode.
you're doing in the polls.
Well, exactly. That's it. We're moving into an election period at the moment. And this is kind of the first chapter of that. And they want to show, after all of the pain that we've had, the cost of living crisis, but also the post-mini-budget fallout, and all of the kind of penance, the fiscal penance that the UK had to pay as a result of that, that there is actually a kind of light at the end of the tunnel. But I don't know how easy that's going to be to pull off, because the economic news isn't that great. It's not terrible, but it's really not great right now. So we're going to be going through all of that.
You'll be busy.
We're bossing it.
You'll be bossing it, won't you?
Really.
I can't believe that. I didn't know what Hot Girl Summer meant. My bad. Somebody who did know what it meant is standing by for us on Downing Street, Mari. Hi, Mari. Thanks for explaining that to me in makeup this morning. Explain to me what's happening in Downing Street right now.
Good morning, Kay. Well, yes, exactly. Just behind me in Downing Street, Cabinet are meeting at the moment. This is a huge moment, a huge day for the government. We've seen lots of Cabinet ministers arriving through that door just a few minutes ago. For instance, the newly appointed Home Secretary, James Cleverly, he's been arriving and he's also actually walked in with Claire Coutinho, Energy Secretary, and Laura Trott, newly appointed Treasury Minister. We've also seen Lord Cameron, the new Foreign Secretary, that big surprise that we had just a few days ago. He's been arriving for Cabinet as well. Now, this to an extent is really Rishi Sunak kind of rallying the troops when it comes to the autumn statement today. Make no mistake, the next general election is going to be a huge and very, very tough uphill battle for the Conservatives. They are 20 points behind Labour in the polls. They need to do something to turn that around, and therefore making sure that Cabinet are behind him, behind the Chancellor, and behind the vision is really important to try and drive that vision through. And also, I mean, this is only phase one. We're expecting more tax cuts, more rabbits being pulled out of the hat later next year in the spring statement as well, ahead of a general election. So this is really setting the tone for how the Conservatives want to fight the next election.
OK, for now, thank you. Well, here's a question that won't be answered by the Chancellor in the statement later on, 12:40 live on Sky News. What are you wearing for work today? Well, you can see what I'm wearing, but what about what you're wearing? A third of employees in Britain have admitted to wearing their pyjamas while they're at work, and 1 in 12 wear their nightwear every day. In a survey, nearly half of bosses said that staff have become too casual since the pandemic, but the research found that Gen Z, that's the 18 to 26-year-olds, are the smartest dressed generation. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rest of the week will be overall drier and less windy than of late, but it will turn noticeably colder by Friday. Mild start across the north, chilly in the south, with early fog patches clearing Ireland and northern parts of the UK will be rather cloudy through the morning with outbreaks of rain or drizzle. Wales will turn increasingly dull and damp as well. Elsewhere, it'll be mainly dry with hazy spells of sunshine.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
A couple of big stories that we are monitoring for you throughout the day here on Sky News. One of them, of course, the autumn statement, just been talking about that. Basically, it's a budget in November. And in addition to that, news reaching us from the Middle East that 50 hostages could well be released by Hamas in exchange for 150 Palestinian prisoners that are being held in Israel. It's up to the Israeli people what happens next. They have 24 hours to vote on whether they agree with the Palestinians being released. I think we can guess what they're going to say. Stay tuned. Hi, everybody. At 9 o'clock, final hour of the breakfast show on Sky News. Biggest diplomatic breakthrough of the war in the Middle East so far. Israel's cabinet has backed a deal with Hamas to secure the release of 50 hostages being held in Gaza. Wednesday, 22nd of November.
In the early hours of this morning, the Israeli Prime Minister's office confirmed that a deal has been reached. 50 Israeli women and children will be released over a 4-day period. And this morning, the Israeli military have told us that they support the deal.
We have to bring the people home. That is, what we need to do. That's our goal.
Hamas says the deal will also see 150 Palestinian prisoners released from Israeli jails. Also ahead, mother of one of the teens found dead in an upturned vehicle in Snowdonia says she feels like she's in a nightmare. Chancellor is expected to announce a cut to national insurance for millions of workers in today's autumn statement.
We're outside Downing Street where Cabinet is meeting any minute. They'll be walking out that door and the Chancellor will be giving his autumn statement.
England's chief medical officer says the government was too slow to lock down. He's back in front of the COVID inquiry this morning. And the pitter-patter of tiny hooves. They're celebrating the arrival of one of the world's rarest animals at Chester Zoo. What is he? Stay tuned to find out. I know he's a rhino, but what sort of rhino? We know that there's an autumn statement. What sort of content might there be, Murray?
Morning, Kay. Well, today is a huge moment for the Chancellor and the Prime Minister because really it sets the tone for what we can expect in a general election, but also it's a moment for them to prove their credentials as low-tax Conservatives.
OK, more of that to come in just a few moments. Murray, thanks very much indeed. Before that, though, let's take you to the Middle East. Alistair standing by for us there. Alistair, we hope that up to 50 hostages might be released over the next few days. What more can you tell us? Good morning.
Good morning, Kay. Well, yes, over the last few weeks, intense negotiations have been going on behind the scenes, led by the Qataris and the Americans, to try and secure a deal between Hamas and the Israelis. But every time it looked as though a deal was getting close, something happened to stop it. But in the early hours of this morning at around 3 a.m., after many hours of deliberations, a statement from the Israeli Prime Minister's office confirmed that a deal has been agreed. Israel's government met for 3 hours, late into the evening at the country's defence ministry, before announcing its support for the hostage deal. Families and friends have had 6 weeks waiting in a vacuum of information for this moment. The agreement is for 50 women and children to be released over a 4-day pause in the fighting. At the same time, more humanitarian aid and fuel will go into Gaza.
I don't know. I hope they're okay, but we don't know nothing.
The agreement will also see 150 Palestinian prisoners released from Israeli jails. Israelis, whose lives may have been affected by those Palestinians, now have 24 hours to object to the deal. And that is a cause for concern for families and supporters of the hostages.
I'm really worried because the deal is talking about mainly about children. And this is just absurd that children are involved in this fight, in this war. We have to bring the children back now as top priority, no matter what.
But there is now a chance to bring home some, if not all, of the women and children being held in Gaza, like Cherie Bibas and her little boys Ariel and baby Kafir, the youngest of the hostages, only 10 months old. And Amelia, abducted with her mother Danielle and her twin cousins Julie and Emma, seized with their parents Sharon and David. There are thought to be as many as 90 women and children being held in Gaza. The deal could be extended by a day for every 10 extra hostages that Hamas agrees to release. But the Israeli government insists the fighting will eventually resume as they work to eliminate Hamas.
So, Alistair, is there anything in the way that could stop this going ahead now?
Potentially, yes. Israel has given Israeli citizens a 24-hour period under Israeli law to challenge in the Supreme Court the release of potentially 150 Palestinian prisoners. So we'll see what happens there. But the expectation is that there will not be anything that actually stops this truce coming into play in the early hours, we expect, of tomorrow morning. Ultimately, even though there was not unanimity in the Israeli cabinet, the Israeli security establishment and intelligence agencies had supported this deal, and as the Israeli military told us this morning, they are also behind it.
Israel is doing everything in order to release hostages, innocents, men, women, children, that have been held against their will unlawfully. And on the other hand, it is indeed convicted terrorists, people that have conducted acts against Israel and against Israelis. So, of course, there is an internal battle there. But the internal battle is, what is the price of an Israeli life? And we are determined to bring them home. This, I think, my personal perspective is not really relevant, but we have to bring the people home. That is, what we need to do. That's our goal. That's one of the goals of this war effort.
We could be in for a very interesting period. It's possible that Hamas will use this pause after more than 6 weeks of being pummeled by the air and by land to string this truce out by drip-feeding a release of hostages. It's also possible that Israel will come under increased international pressure to extend the truce into a more permanent, long-lasting ceasefire. The Israelis say that is not what they intend to happen. They have unfinished business in Gaza. They are yet to eliminate senior Hamas leadership, and there will be hostages that remain in Gaza, particularly IDF soldiers. But I think, one way or another, the dynamic on the ground in Gaza will change in some respect as a result of this truce.
OK, for now, thank you. And at 9 o'clock this evening here on Sky News, we'll have a special programme with Yalda live from Jerusalem on the Israel-Hamas war and the latest on the hostage deal. To some of today's other headlines for you now, Sam Altman, the ousted boss of OpenAI, is returning to the company despite being fired last week. The company, which makes ChatGPT, said it has reached an agreement in principle that involves a new board being installed. It follows threats by OpenAI staff to quit if Mr. Altman wasn't reinstalled. New researchers find that some hospital disinfectants are no more effective at killing off a superbug than water. Scientists at the University of Plymouth found that bleach, which is used to clean hospital scrubs and surfaces, does not kill a bacteria which infects millions of people each year. Experts are warning that without new disinfectants and guidelines, staff and patients will be at risk. And the TV and radio presenter Annabel Giles has died 4 months after being diagnosed with a brain tumour. Her children revealed the news, calling the 64-year-old an incredible mother and truly one of a kind on social media. The presenter was perhaps best known for presenting the 1990s ITV fashion show Posh Frocks and New Trousers. Oh, we've got a graph behind you. Ed's here.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
We were talking a moment ago about, the challenge for the Chancellor and the government as a whole.
Autumn statement.
Is that we've got the autumn statement coming up. And, in fact, look, autumn statement. And the tax burden is actually really high. And how can they convince people that they are cutting taxes? And this, I just don't know how they kind of deal with this. Because look at this line, behind me. That's showing you the total amount of tax that everyone in the country, the businesses, the whole lot, pays in tax as a percentage of GDP. You're going all the way back to 1948 here. And just look at what happens to the line in the coming years. Look at how that goes up. So that's going up to the highest level since 1948. You can see that there on your screen. That's the highest since 1948. And we are going to be just looking at that chart, seeing how it gets updated today, and just trying to kind of cast that judgment as to whether this is...
This is a Conservative government, right?
Yeah, it's a Conservative government, and yet they have raised taxes by more than almost any other government in history. And how can they at the same time claim that they are trying to cut taxes? I just don't see how you can square those two things. But listen, let's wait and see how the numbers come out. And just in terms of, can I do a few more charts? Is that
yes,
okay?
Please.
You know, there's more to cut. You tell me when to stop, basically.
Never.
The main thing. Oh, you're going to regret that. By the way. The main thing here is just seeing, I'm just going to zip past that last one. The main thing here is seeing just how those growth numbers change, OK? So that is the economic growth picture as of the last autumn statement. Now, this is supposed to be a feel-good moment where the government is saying things are starting to get better. Just have a look at how the bars are from the latest Bank of England forecast, OK? So that's what the government was forecasting last time around. This is the Bank of England's latest forecast.
Oh, dear.
So just look how much lower those bars are. A bit better in 2023, so that year that we're in at the moment, OK? So that's where some of the good news, in inverted commas, is coming from. But just look at what happens later out. It is miserable. And that, again, is the challenge. The Chancellor will want to point to those sunlit uplands that we're heading towards, but actually the uplands are looking like lowlands right now when you look at those bars. Again, we'll get those numbers updated and we'll kind of see how the cards fall on that. And then there'll be a lot of talk about how he has lots of room to, make these changes to taxes, about he's going to bring in full expensing. That's potentially a big deal. But I think that's the issue, is you've got these things that are overshadowing a lot of the debate here, which mean it's not necessarily a feel-good moment for the economy right now. It's not disastrous, but, it's tough. People are still facing cost of living crisis right now. Yes, inflation has halved, but frankly, most economists thought it would have done by now. But yeah, good that it has. And energy prices are still really high as well. So there's a lot that's an obstacle here to the big political message they want to get across, which is, look, we're heading for an election and we're going to make your life a bit better.
I want to know what that chart was that you flicked through.
Shall I do another? I mean, all that one was showing you. We showed the taxes a moment ago.
Yeah.
This is showing you
that
current
literally
spending.
Off the chart.
It's literally off the chart, but that's it's because of COVID. I just didn't want to kind of zoom out because we spent so much during COVID on the furlough scheme. But the point of this chart is basically saying, yeah, you think taxes are high. Look at spending. And that's just current spending. So that's just the spending, not even investment, just spending on day-to-day stuff like running the NHS, which obviously is a lot of that money. How do you cut taxes while at the same time having to finance this enormous state? And that, again, that's not something you're going to deal with one fiscal statement. So you've got all of this stuff that's, I think, bearing down on the Chancellor and making it very difficult for him to try and cast this picture that he wants to. But nonetheless, things are a bit better than they were last year. I mean, last autumn statement was the one where they actually raised a lot of these taxes in order to try to clean up the mess after the mini-budget. So things are better. And that was always the narrative they wanted to paint, the government, which is that there's a bit of tough love now to try and get things working, and things are going to be better, off in a year once we've dealt with inflation, once we've dealt with the fiscal crisis. So,
OK. But no, you've got a busy day ahead. Yeah,
there's lots. There's going to be lots, and I think part of the challenge for us.
You need to stop talking because Mari's in the cold.
Oh, sorry. OK, yeah, no, go tomorrow, but we'll have more.
I know that. I don't doubt it for 1 second. Do you, Mari?
Morning, Kay. Yeah, so we've just seen all of the Cabinet coming out of that door behind me, 10 Downing Street, from that Cabinet meeting. We've had the likes of James Cleverly, the newly appointed Home Secretary, getting into his ministerial car. We've also had Steve Barclay, for instance. We've had Lucy Fraser, Education Secretary Gillian Keegan, all the top team filing out of that door after that Cabinet meeting where they discussed the autumn statement. Now, it's important to remember, with this autumn statement, there's a lot of speculation around things like business taxes, for instance, but what we do think is extremely likely here at Sky News is a cut to the national insurance tax. That's expected to be cut later today. Now, also, it's important to remember the Labour Party are trying to say this is going to be too little too late, it's not going to do very much. Now, also, the Resolution Foundation, which is a think tank that's looked into this, they also actually don't believe that these tax cuts are going to be enough to make people feel any really better off because, as Ed Conway was explaining to you, the thresholds for those taxes are being frozen. Now, you can see from those images there, Cabinet Ministers filing out a number 10. This is a huge day for the government on so many levels. They are 20 points behind in the polls. They've got to find some way of pulling a rabbit out of the hat today and showing a reason why people should turn back to the Conservatives. Otherwise, they potentially face election defeat. So the question is, will today's autumn statement do that? Will it be enough?
OK, for now, thank you. Well, from 11 o'clock this morning, Sophie will have full coverage of the autumn statement, where she'll be joined by political and economic experts. Before that, though, some of the other headlines making news here on The Breakfast Show this morning. Heart bleeds for this from a mother of one of the 4 teenagers who was found dead in an upturned vehicle in Snowdonia, says she feels like she's in a nightmare. The police are continuing to investigate what happened to the students who were on a camping trip when they disappeared. Let's get more with Shingi Shikli. Apparently it was someone in a tractor that was driving past. Because they were high, they could see into the ditch where these kids were in this upturned vehicle.
Yeah, that's right, Kay. That member of the public gave the police a tip-off after having seen that silver Ford Fiesta submerged and in water, and what the police are describing for now as a tragic accident. And you were just mentioning there the unimaginable loss being felt by one of the parents of one of those boys, Crystal Owen, the mother of Harvey Owen, had just posted on Facebook inside the last hour or so. And she said, "I feel like I'm in a nightmare I wish I could wake up from, but I'm not. I just wanted to say I do appreciate people's kindness, but no amount of messages is going to help me overcome this. Nothing will make this nightmare go away." Just a reminder of the loss that those people will be feeling, and a loss also being felt in this community here where the incident happened. Someone has brought a candle here, a solitary candle, just to mark and remember the lives of the boys. And just going back to the incident, which triggered a huge emergency response beginning on Monday, involving a number of emergency services as well as mountain rescue, all trying to locate the boys in a really rural, rugged area. And you can see the A road behind me where the incident happened, coming off a bend round here. Potentially it's a really difficult area to drive in if the weather conditions are like they were on Sunday, which were wet and difficult with low visibility. The police say they are investigating the circumstances in which the car came off the road, but this is an incident which has obviously left a very long tail of trauma, and families now picking up the pieces after what is obviously a horrendous set of events.
OK, for now, thank you. Deputy Chief Medical Officer to the government throughout the pandemic, Sir Jonathan Van Tam, will give evidence today in front of the COVID inquiry. Yesterday, England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Sir Chris Whitty, told the inquiry he believed the first lockdown in March of 2020, remember that, came a bit too late in his opinion. Ashish has more.
JVT, he is here. Jonathan Van Tam has arrived. Now, what will be interesting today is yesterday, Professor Sir Chris Whitty was asked about any divergence in the scientific community. Whether we were told the day before that the Chief Medical Officer, Sir Patrick Vallance, Sir Chris Whitty, were in disagreement at what time the country should lock down, when it should lock down. Chris Whitty thought they should go later, and Sir Patrick Vallance thinking they should go earlier. We were told yesterday in the evidence that Sir Chris Whitty was listening to Professor Jonathan Van Tam, who was monitoring the situation in China, and he alerted the government very early on in January that there was this virus outbreak in China. He was potentially concerning. And then he told the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, who didn't think at that time in January that it was an emergency which required urgent intervention. In other words, those NPIs that we've talked about, those non-pharmaceutical interventions, and moving the country into lockdown. He said, let's wait and see. And he was probed on that again and again and again by Hugo Keith KC, and saying, don't you think, in retrospect, it was a mistake? He said, no. Given the evidence I had at the time, the data I had at the time, it was the right decision to make. So it will be interesting to see today whether Professor Jonathan Van Tam disagrees with his Chief Medical Officer and says today to the inquiry that he thinks the country should have moved earlier. So we'll be looking for some tension there. But yesterday, certainly, Sir Chris Whitty sticking to his line, as he has done throughout the pandemic, that he acted according to the evidence presented to him and that he was not responsible for making decisions. It was his job as a Chief Medical Officer to present the data and the science to the government, and they, as the politicians, had to take those difficult decisions.
More on that throughout the course of the day here on Sky. Also still to come, we'll speak to a former army colonel about the hostage deal broker between Israel and Hamas. Plus, King Charles shows off his pop culture knowledge, and a new rare arrival at Chester Zoo. Of course it's a rhino, but what kind of rhino?
A gloomy set of economic forecasts.
Households and businesses around the country are suffering.
We've got slower growth and yet higher inflation, so the worst of both worlds.
Where is that line going to go?
The bank predicted the UK economy would flatline.
And you begin to get a sense of how the economy is doing. Soggy.
It's a very challenging environment in the short term. Then we can be very confident of our future.
A lot of people come to us for well-being aspects. People who suffer from anxiety. We often get people who message me and say, I know someone that's autistic. I think they benefit from this. Other people really just love cows already and want to spend some time with them. The problem with cows is that they're so big. Generally, cows are quite inquisitive. They are, on the whole, very friendly. I mean, I would say don't just go and approach a cow in the field because you just never know. These are ones we've worked a lot with. We knew they were already friendly and confident. They're really used to seeing people now, and they do actually love the attention. They're really enjoying having people here to see them. This is Cuddle Puff. She's a British Blue Cross. The rest of our cuddle cows are dairy crosses. When we had dairy herd up to last year, we sold those because of the flooding in the area, and we kept these because we just couldn't bear to part with them. They were our friends. £40 at the moment, and that lasts about 2.5 hours. We meet the cuddle cows for about 3/4 of an hour, and then we meet our little Highlands as well. Really popular. We put tickets on sale, and we sell out usually within about half an hour. But we only take 6 people at once. There's three of us farmers, my husband, my brother, and myself. So one of us will just spend time with each couple, telling them about the cows, making sure everyone's safe. And making sure they have a really nice time.
Simon is with us here in the studio to talk in more detail about what's happening in the Middle East. We were just having a chat, weren't we, during the break. I can't begin to imagine how the families must be feeling. I've talked to so many of them. There are still things that could get in the way, but we are hopefully a little bit closer to them being reunited with their loved ones today.
We hope so. I mean, I listened to an Israeli spokesman about an hour ago. For the first time, he said this is the first good morning he's had in nearly 6 weeks. And I think there's a psychological pressure on the families. The sheer emotion of wondering, are my family all right? Are they going to be released? Is still very, very high. And there are elements about this which are still not very clear. So the names are not being released in toto. They've been released on a sort of daily basis. So people aren't going to be released or not. And there's a lot of conditions being put in place as well as to whether or not the truce and therefore the release of hostages take place. And at any stage, one of those conditions could be deemed to be broken by one side or another, and the whole deal could then be off. And that's very hard.
And how, I'm sure you've been in this sort of position before, how is that managed? What do you do? How do you look after the families? How do you try to make sure that it goes ahead? how do you deal with the fact that there might be some sort of rogue missile or whatever from Hamas that makes everything off?
Yeah, and that's very hard. And I think that's part of the overall judgment. If the overall judgment is that the truce is holding, but as you say, you're dealing with rogues who are not necessarily fully under command, and one of the most
Who don't want it to go ahead, perhaps.
Who don't want it to go ahead, and one of the difficulties I know that on the Hamas side is we understand that not all the hostages are actually in Hamas's side. The suggestion is that Islamic Jihad are there, and they may have some hostages, and there are also some criminal gangs who may be involved as well. And for them, there's no real incentive for them to hand the thing over properly. So there are lots of ways it can go wrong. And so it's a matter of patience and hopefully just keeping an eye on, if you like, the greater good. What is the greater good in this? And the first and most important thing is to sort of get the hostages out and start to allow some humanitarian aid into Gaza.
And how do those that don't want Hamas to get more weaponry, how do they make sure that doesn't happen during this pause?
Well, that's one of the difficulties, and one of the things that one of the conditions Hamas were looking for was that drone flights should be restricted. Now, I'm not sure exactly what arrangements have been made, but the accusation was that they would be used as a way of conducting, if you like, reconnaissance, nothing to do with actually the release of hostages. The Israelis argued that what they were going to do was basically just monitor the release of hostages. I'm not sure what agreement they've come to over the moment, but that was one of the sticking points in the conversation.
Try to put yourself in the position of those families at the moment.
Yeah.
This 24 hours, like the last 24 hours and the 24 hours before that, hoping against hope their loved ones will be released, and not knowing which ones will be released and which ones won't.
No, this is very, very hard indeed. I mean, I think what we're hoping, everyone's hoping, is this looks like it's just the slightest glimmer, the first green shoot of something you might call a humanitarian impulse on both sides. The hostages must be released, and everyone knows that. But the sense, at least, is a conversation which is about human beings and not about causes, I think is really important. Now, if the truce does hold, and there is a really positive prize out there, then the suggestion would be then that this could then continue, and then further hostages could be released on a base of 10 hostages per day. And that starts to create...
It
starts to extend it. And I think when you start to extend it, then some of the things at the moment seem just incredible, don't seem quite so incredible. And then they will be in place then to kind of start another, if you like, southern Gaza campaign, like the northern Gaza campaign, I don't know.
But once you've released all of the hostages, if, God willing, that happens, what's the incentive for Hamas to do that? Because Israel, I mean, I'm putting it simply, but, you know, they'll be straight back at it.
That's one of the great concerns, and whether or not there's even the beginnings of political conversation. At the moment, the language is coming from Israel is still that we intend to eliminate Hamas, eliminate their infrastructure, and everything goes with that. But there are other people talking to the Israelis as well and saying there's somewhere along the line there needs to be a conversation, not necessarily with Hamas, but there was a similar instance, of course, happened in the 80s when Israel invaded southern Lebanon, and then at that point, a lot of then was the PLO were evacuated out of the Lebanon and went elsewhere. Now Hamas are maybe on a different sort of scale from them, but that's how the Israelis extricated themselves from that. So there may well be a conversation about we'll extricate Hamas from there, and then we still have the whole business then about how you put this area, this country of 2 million people back together.
Okay. We must leave it there, Simon, but it's good of you to take the time. Thank you very much. Thank you. Due to hear from the Russian President Vladimir Putin later on today when he addresses G20 leaders at their virtual summit. Let's get more from our Moscow correspondent, Diana Magne, standing by for us. Hi, Diana. What more do we know?
Well, we know that it's the first time in a long time that Vladimir Putin will be in the presence, if only virtually, of a lot of Western leaders at G20 at the same summit. And I think because it's a virtual summit, we won't really know if some of those leaders register their dislike of his presence, as they have done in the past, certainly since the beginning of the Ukraine war, when his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, has attended similar conferences on his behalf. And what do we expect to hear from him? Well, he will talk apparently about the turbulent global situation and Russia's apparently balanced neutral position in it. We can expect him to rail against what he's called the imperial colonial attitude of the US. We heard from him yesterday addressing a BRICS summit where they called for a ceasefire in Gaza, where he said that the current problems between the Palestinians and the Israelis stemmed from the American attempt to monopolise mediation between the two. In fact, we've seen that mediation pay off in today's hostage deal, so perhaps that slightly takes the wind out of Vladimir Putin's sail. But I think what he wants to project in all of his discussions from now on, especially as he assumes the presidency of BRICS next year, is that Russia represents the global south. He is a great statesman, a sage statesman who can speak for those who also resent US hegemony. I think that's going to be the tone of what we hear, and we'll tell you more when we hear it.
For now, thank you. A quick look at the weather for you.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Rest of the week overall drier, less windy than of late, but it will turn noticeably colder by Friday. Mild start across the north, chilly in the south with early fog patches clearing. Ireland and northern parts of the UK will be rather cloudy through the morning with outbreaks of rain or drizzle.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
We'll be bringing you images of a baby rhino in a few moments. Oh, yes, we will. Also talking in more detail about the autumn statement and how crumbling concrete is leaving business owners in Greater Manchester out of pocket at what's supposed to be their busiest time of year. Hello again, everybody. Autumn Statement Day, tell you more about that coming up shortly. Before that, also, obviously, very much keeping an eye on what's happening in Gaza. Could some of the hostages be released from today by Hamas in an exchange with prisoners being held by Israel? That to come, and also what impact it might have on humanitarian aid going into Gaza. Here's Alex.
You see that long line of ambulances? It's part of a large convoy from Saudi Arabia, which also includes more than 300 trucks of humanitarian aid. This is part of the convoy, carrying what they say is vital medicines, vital food, vital relief equipment into the Gaza Strip. The amount of aid that's been allowed in over the past 6 to 7 weeks has been minuscule, sometimes down to 50 or 60 trucks a day, when ordinarily before October the 7th it was up to 500, 800 trucks a day. So the situation has become quite critical. And this entire hostage deal is also predicated on the aid coming in. Hostages coming out, focus specifically on women and children, and aid going in, as well as the truce over, they're hoping, 4 days. Everything is hanging in the balance right now and hoping that this all goes through. The next 24 hours will be critical, with the first hostages expected out at the earliest by Thursday morning. And then we expect this aid will be seen to be trundling in, or at least some of it.
We can only hope, can't we? What about the hope for the families of the hostages being held? I spoke to one of them earlier.
We were very hopeful initially, and now even with this announcements and jubilation, if you like, around the release, still I'm afraid to be hopeful, which is a very sort of a sad state of affairs, because I just don't trust Hamas at all, and until they are home and safe, I think they can still conduct so many manipulation and so many ways to aggrieve us even further. Like breaching the ceasefire, like they did in 2014, and killed Adar Goldin and took his body. There is no end to this, so I want to be hopeful, but, I'm just afraid, I'm afraid, that after this, if something goes wrong, it will be another low point, and there's been enough of this.
Still hurdles to cross. The Israeli public now gets to decide whether they have 24 hours to decide whether they agree that Palestinian prisoners can be released in this swap with up to 50 hostages. I'm guessing that they will vote in favour of that. And then, as we were just hearing from Alex a little bit earlier on, by tomorrow morning, we could see some of the first hostages being released. Of course, we'll monitor that for you. As we did earlier in the year when we were talking about RAC. Do you remember RAC? It was in a lot of buildings that were constructed in the 60s, 70s. Schools and hospitals find themselves collapsing concrete at a time. It was known as RAC, R-A-A-C. Let's talk to Chelsea, should we? Chelsea is a nail technician. She found herself in a building that had RAC in it. You owned House of Beauty. I'm sure you still do, Chelsea. Tell us what impact it had on you and what's happening now.
It's had a detrimental impact to my business. As you can understand, it's the busiest time of year for us traders. We take a lot of our profits in November and December to cover us through the quieter months. So it has been devastating to myself and other traders within the market hall. We have no clue of when the building will
I just
be
wondered what help
repaired.
you'd received, Chelsea. Yeah, what help did you get from the government?
Nothing as of yet. We had more help within COVID. We've had no support other than a £300 grant at the very start of the month, back in October. Since then, we've had links to the job centre. I have a job. Unfortunately, I can't do my job as the building that I leasehold from is not in a state I can trade, basically.
What do you want the government to do? Is there anything that the Chancellor could say today that would help you?
We're urging for some help and some support from the government, maybe something like a package like we got back in COVID. We just hope that we can get some help and we can get back trading just to save our businesses at our busiest time of year, really.
Yeah. OK, well, fingers crossed that you hear something from the Chancellor today that will help you in your business, especially leading up to Christmas. Thanks for taking the time. Look after yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Former boss of ChatGPT, that's Sam Altman, is returning to the company that fired him just a week ago. Let's get more with Artie.
On the face of it, it looks like OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, is back where it was 5 days ago. But in reality, behind the scenes, things are actually very different. And to understand what's going on, the main thing you need to understand is the fact that OpenAI was actually set up as a non-profit company back in 2015. So this means that the board members that initially dismissed Sam Altman, their duty is to ensure the safe generation of AI and to make sure that any AI that is generated by the company is broadly beneficial to the public. Now, this is different to the mission of most corporate boards, which is usually just to maximize the value for shareholders. So if we look at then what does that mean for the decisions they've made in the last few days, we still don't know exactly what happened and what Sam Altman was, in their words, not candid about. But what has been clear in the last few days is that a key player in this power struggle has been Microsoft. Now, they own about 49% of the company, and they were only thought to have been made aware minutes before the announcement was made public that Sam Altman was to be dismissed. They've not been happy about this. They've offered jobs to both Sam Altman and his co-founder, Greg Brockman, who left the company in solidarity, and to more than 700 OpenAI employees who were looking to move from the company and go to Microsoft in an act of resistance. And so after all of this upheaval, it looks like we might be back where we started. But really, the question remains about the OpenAI and how they're going to be able to play the commercial interests of Microsoft and the influence that it has over the company, but also the duty that they were set up for and the public good that they are bound to.
OK, for now, thanks. King has shown he's down with the kids during a state banquet for the president of South Korea. Charles made several pop culture references while addressing the guests at Buckingham Palace. In attendance were the members of K-pop group, as King Charles said, Blackpink.
Korea has matched Danny Boyle with Bong Joon-ho, James Bond with Squid Game, and the Beatles' Let It Be with BTS's Dynamic, or Dynamite. I applaud Jenny, Jisoo, Lisa and Rosé, better known collectively as Blackpink, for their role in bringing the message of environmental sustainability to a global audience as ambassadors for the UK's presidency of COP26 and later as advocates for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I can only admire how they can prioritise these vital issues as well as being global superstars. Sadly, when I was in Seoul all those years ago, I'm not sure I developed much of what might be called the Gangnam style.
Amelia, new member of the gang, also down with the kids. Tell me what we're talking about.
Oh, I don't know if I'm exactly down with the kids, but here in the paper, we have totes amazeballs, the 25 words we detest. Now, okay, I don't know.
Two of them are there.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you a little bit more. So these were apparently beloved by millennials. Not so sure I agree. They've been voted some of the most annoying in modern culture. So this was a survey of 2,000 Britons, essentially looking at the words that people find the most annoying. So 1 in 3 voted amazeballs as the most likely to see them seeing red.
Which means?
Amazing.
Yeah,
great.
Rather splendid.
Splendid, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It says here, rather splendid. We're obviously heading up to Christmas. People think at number 10 that Crimbo is pretty cringy. So, yeah, I mean, Kay, I know you've got some couple of dogs, haven't you? Some
I
gorgeous
have.
dogs.
My fur babies.
There you go.
I know, this is
She's
not my
read
first
this
ring.
already. She knows her stuff. This interaction you could call very funny. What might you say?
Bants.
That is one of them. So number 4 was lols.
Lols.
We could be having a lol. Or number 5, bants, a jokey
But
interaction.
We're certainly bossing it.
That has come in at, let's have a look, bossing it has come in at...
Number 23.
Number 23, it means in control.
Yeah.
2 women in control this morning.
Yeah, and what about number 24?
Number 24 is, well, it's a bit early, I think.
5 o'clock somewhere.
Wine o'clock, it is 5 o'clock somewhere. But, and 25, you've got my bad, I've made an error.
Yeah.
Not if we're bossing it, we don't do that.
Exactly. Finally, did you know what hot girl summer meant? I didn't know.
Well, Kay, I've had a fair few hot girl summers now. I'm joking. We just sit out in the sun and have a nice summer. I believe a hot girl summer is just gals out and about on the town having a bit of fun.
Yep, exactly. Especially after they have broken up with somebody and they're sort of getting their life back together.
And maybe after wine o'clock.
There you go, and having some din-dins with your mates. Well, OK, dear reader, we're going to stop there. Thanks very much. Thank you. Still to come, if that didn't entertain you, I'm sure it did, this certainly will. Seals and rhinos. Oh, yeah, stay tuned.
A lot of people come to us for well-being aspects, people who suffer from anxiety. We often get people who message me and say, I know someone that's autistic, I think they benefit from this. Other people really just love cows already and want to spend some time with them. The problem with cows is that they're so big. Generally, cows are quite inquisitive. They are, on the whole, very friendly. I mean, I would say don't just go and approach a cow in the field because you just never know. These are ones we've worked a lot with. We knew they were already friendly and confident. They're really used to seeing people now, and they do actually love the attention. They're really enjoying having people here to see them. This is Cuddle Puff. She's a British Blue Cross. The rest of our cuddle cows are dairy crosses. When we had dairy herd up to last year, we sold those because of the flooding in the area, and we kept these because we just couldn't bear to part with them. They were our friends. £40 at the moment, and that lasts about 2.5 hours. We meet the cuddle cows about 3/4 of an hour, and then we meet our little Highlands as well. Really popular. We put tickets on sale, and we sell out usually within about half an hour. But we only take 6 people at once. There's three of us farmers, my husband, my brother, and myself. So one of us will just spend time with each couple, telling them about the cows, making sure everyone's safe. And making sure they have a really nice time.
Slight better. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Baby rhinos to come. Stay tuned for that. Before that, though, let me tell you about the number of animals being abandoned by their owners. It's risen to a 3-year high. I wonder why that is. There's a warning from the RSPCA that pets face a bleak winter due to the ongoing costs of living crisis. Alice has more.
These cats once had homes and owners. Now they've been deserted as the cost of living bites.
Vet fees are going up, pet food is going up, pet toys are going up, and unfortunately we're finding more and more people are deciding to abandon their animals.
Terraluccio is one of them. She was taken in by the RSPCA after her owner couldn't afford the vet fees when she fell from a building. It's a similar story for all these cats.
Where's he gone? Where's he gone?
The pandemic caused a surge in demand for dogs as people were at home and looking for companionship. Unfortunately, that's contributed to this current situation, as there's now more owners struggling with the costs of having a dog. The RSPCA say more than 18,000 animals have been abandoned so far this year, but they're not the only organisation that are noticing how the cost of living is impacting owners and animals across the country. The Blue Cross works directly with food banks to provide pet food for owners who can't afford it.
Because of a whole number of circumstances, and the cost of living being one of them, our shelves are empty, and so we're having requests from our food bank partners, and we're not able to wholly fulfil those requests.
Terraluccio now has a new home, but thousands of pets across the country are not so lucky, and with inflation remaining high, the worry is that the situation may simply get worse. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Latest on the COVID inquiry. If you want to watch that, then you just need to, we've got a barcode for you. There we go. A QR code, I should say. There it is. And if you just hold your phone up to that, you can hear what Chris Whitty is saying. Sir Chris Whitty to me. He had a full day yesterday, should have ended yesterday. Obviously, didn't go quite as quickly as they anticipated. Once he moves on, Jonathan Van Tam will be taking to the dais, and we'll, of course, cover that for you if you use your QR code. If you're still with me, hello. Chester Zoo has welcomed the birth of one of the world's rarest animals. There are only 6,000 left in the wild. Can you guess what it is? Well, let's cross to the zoo and speak to Callum Garner, who is a rhino keeper. Hi, Callum. It's good to see you. Tell me about this baby rhino.
Hi, good morning. So we're all very excited at the zoo at the minute on the birth of our latest black rhino. She brings our numbers up to 9 here at the zoo. Hopefully she'll join us out on the paddock this morning. She's sticking really close to mum. So wherever Zori's outside, you'll usually see the calf trotting up behind her. So the calf's just over a week old now, weighing at around 50 kilos when first born. She's very, she brightens up everyone's day. Everyone's very keen to see her. There's crowds gathering behind the restaurant trying to catch the glimpse of the rhino as she's out and about on the paddock.
She's a black rhino, isn't she? Quite unusual to see a black rhino, certainly in the wild. How many have been born in captivity?
Yeah, so she's an eastern black rhino. So in captivity, there's been over 100 births over the last few years. Here, our last black rhino was born 3 years ago. So we've waited 15 months for this little girl to arrive.
Amazing. It's amazing. I hope that we'll be able to... We've been looking at pictures of her. Obviously, she's sticking very close to mum. Can't see her at the moment, but we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. And we're looking at the moment that she was born while we're chatting to you. Do keep us informed. Let us know how she gets on. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Yeah, will do. Thank you.
Well, from land mammals to sea mammals, first grey seal pups of the winter season have been born on the North Norfolk coast. Chris Bilby, Countryside National Trust, is with us. Chris, tell us more about them.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, it's good morning. It's that time of year when we welcome the grey seals to Blakeney Point on the North Norfolk coast. And over the next few weeks, we're expecting somewhere in the region of 4,500 pups to be born.
That's a lot.
It really is, yeah. It's staggering when you go out there just a couple of months before, and there's basically no seals there, and then in the space of just a couple of months, 4,500 pups are born. Each pup will have a mum, so that's another 4,500 seals, and then there's the bulls, the males as well. So probably somewhere in the region of 15,000 seals will be on Blakeney Point over the course of this winter.
Amazing, Chris. What role is the National Trust playing?
So we play a really important role working with our volunteers to help manage disturbance to them. So we have visitors who are really keen to come and see them for obvious reasons, but they are wild animals, and this is a really important part of their life cycle. So it's really important that we respect them and we give them space. So we have staff and volunteers out on Blakely Point right now, ready to welcome visitors, help them to understand what they're seeing in front of them, but to explain how they can observe them safely, asking them to keep their distance and helping to protect the seals.
OK, for now, thank you.
Thank you.
Looks pretty chilly on the coast there this morning, doesn't it? What about for the rest of us?
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, I'm glad you asked. The rest of the week, overall drier and less windy than recently, but it'll turn noticeably colder by Friday. Mild start across the north, chilly in the south with early fog patches clearing. Ireland and northern parts of the UK will be rather cloudy through the morning with outbreaks of rain or drizzle.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Been a busy programme for you this morning. Looking forward to the day ahead. We've been in Downing Street for you. They've been having a cabinet meeting there ahead of the autumn statement today. That's at 12:40 after Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons. What does it mean? Well, basically, it's like the budget in November ahead of the proper budget, if you will, in the spring. Will there be tax cuts? That's what's being flagged. Let's wait and see. Sophie and Ed will be here to take you through the day. In addition to that, we have got both eyes on what's happening in the Middle East. Could 50 of the hostages taken by Hamas on the 7th of October be about to be released? We can only hope against hope, can't we? Certainly you'll find out if you stay tuned to Sky. See you tomorrow? Do hope so.